Chapter 331. Commander Maddens and others found their retreat from the sea platform quite smooth. The Special Forces elite, who had been deployed outside, had successfully held the retreat path clear from the central tower entrance to the landing site. Indeed, there should still be a considerable number of aberrant beasts and cult members from the Nature Salvation Society within these upper structures, and they did indeed attempt to attack the Special Forces warriors holding the corridor. Initially, the warriors of the Special Forces Brigade had a bit of difficulty in combat. Although each of them was an elite of T3 or even T2 level and they were equipped with some of the finest individual gear available to the Union, barring the Star Warriors, they were outnumbered. They had to guard the landing site and the entirety of the corridor. Under the assaults of the various monsters and cultists far more numerous than they, the warriors had a tough fight on their hands. There were casualties, exhaustion from running from place to place to support and put out fires, and the defenders' positions sometimes changed hands. But ultimately, after paying a costly toll in lives, they managed to hold their ground. When the energy shield in the sky finally dissipated, the days of hardship came to an end. A large number of Wind Falcon fighters rapidly descended in altitude and commenced strafing and launching missiles at various ground targets. The enemy's few anti-air defenses, those biotech AA guns, boomed towards the sky, but to little effect. The protection on the Wind Falcons, slightly stronger than that of armored vehicles, wouldn't be easily compromised. Moreover, once the energy shield was gone, they could maintain a higher flight altitude, supporting the ground forces even better. Flying higher meant they were less likely to be hit by anti-air defenses. In these circumstances, the pressure on the human defenders on the ground was greatly alleviated. Then, the allies who had gone down earlier were back up as well. At Commander Madden's call, everyone rapidly retreated and assembled at the landing site. He then personally led the charge to knock out several of the enemy's anti-air fire points, and established a defensive perimeter around the landing site. Subsequently, once the landing site was relatively safe, the Wind Falcons landed in groups of 3, taking on 10 people each before withdrawing. This continued until Commander Maddens and 3 other interstellar warriors were the last to evacuate. Enjoy exclusive chapters from Empire. As the final batch of Wind Falcons took off from the sea platform, Commander Maddens sent the signal for orbital strike authority to the skies above. It was very difficult to communicate with Revival City from here, nearly 5 or 6,000 kilometers away. The Union had not yet installed a complete communications network nor launched communication satellites. But wasn't there a starship in orbit? As long as the starship was properly positioned, not on the other side of the planet, communication could be achieved. Before departing, Gu Hang had specifically instructed both Commander Maddens and the Claw-Fierce Tiger on the orbit, giving Maddens full authority to request an orbital strike. His request would be treated as if it were his own. This was a significant authorization. Aboard the Claw-Fierce Tiger, Major Duz Heshan and Colonel Yelazai received the request for an orbital strike. Since there was prior authorization from Gu Hang, the 2 commanders of the Imperial Navy followed the standard procedure. The Planetary governor requesting an orbital strike didn't mean they would automatically carry it out. They were part of the Imperial Navy, not the Rage Owl Planet Navy. Upon receiving the request, they would still need to briefly assess it. The main assessment was the value of the target. If the target was insignificant, or not considered an enemy of the Empire, then they had to be more cautious. Today, after receiving the strike request from Commander Maddens, they were in the process of assessment. It's not about whether the value of the target is enough for an orbital strike, a great unclean one, and about to open abyss rift, that's more than enough. What they need to evaluate instead is this for real? Major Duz Heshan, upon seeing the short message on the application report, clearly written with these matters, was dumbstruck. His age was not young either, he was an honors graduate from the Naval Academy and had served on a starship for many years, working diligently and fostering his experience. Moreover, by holding on to the Fufana family's coattails, he finally made it to the position of a starship captain at the age of 55, holding the rank of a major. But in his 30 years of military career, his main experience was fighting pirates. The biggest scenario he had ever encountered was, when he was not yet a captain, following the main force of the Tianma fleet to combat the Greenskins, and even then, he was just an engine system administrator who followed orders during the battle, hardly entering the command bridge and seeing much of anything. The moment he heard the name of the Great Demon, he truly felt bewildered. Major Duz Heshan turned his head towards Yelazai. Colonel, has life in the orbit of Rage Owl Star always been this thrilling? Indeed. Yelazai could only respond with a bitter smile. Several months ago, an orbital strike on the proliferating green-skin tribes on the surface was one thing, but later, she was inexplicably coaxed by Gu Hang to participate in a one versus many interstellar naval battle, which was already thrilling enough. She thought that would have been the end of it. But the great demon. Honestly, Gu Hang brought a new meaning to her. She hadn't expected to face such an adversary and also realized the enormity of the situation. Never mind why Rage Owl Star had so many issues, that was not particularly strange. The proliferation of the greenskins was due to pre-war era research samples leaking after the world was destroyed, and demon rifts, too, were normal, considering Rage Owl Star was a planet destroyed and then rebuilt because of a demon wave. But what concerned her more was that this seemed to symbolize military achievements. The appearance of a great demon signaled an impending disaster. Right now, Rage Owl Star was not the prosperous place it used to be, capable of supporting a vast planetary defense force with ample funds. Once the demons gained momentum, under the leadership of a great unclean one, it would strike at the entire planet with overwhelming force. Yelazaya admitted that Gu Hang had his ways, having built up a wasteland into what it was now in just half a year. His forces were also excellent, and in fact, not much worse than some of the Star Realm Army Corps. Despite this, numbers were always a problem. With an army of only a few 100,000, it was impossible to resist the ravages of a demon wave and hold out until Imperial support arrived. If demons were to actually succeed in occupying the entire planet and transform it into a demon world, dragging it completely into the chaotic abyss, then the situation would be far more serious. It would no longer be a matter of whether Rage Owl Star could be held, but rather that this demon wave might spread to other star systems. After corrupting an entire world, the numbers of demons would be incredibly large. They would also have the capability to drag an entire chaos fleet out of the chaotic abyss, and at that point, the whole star sector might face war. Gu Hang would certainly be doomed, and she, Yelazaya, would probably not escape being tainted by association. Her family was still capitalizing on the momentum of the last war, crafting a reputation, shaping an image for her as a rising star in the military. She couldn't afford any mistakes now. But on the other hand, killing a great demon here and preventing the opening of an abyss rift would also be a great achievement. Even though commanding a starship to perform orbital strikes against the ground didn't fully count as a naval achievement, and paled in comparison to the solid merits brought by a hardy naval battle, on the whole, it was definitely better than doing nothing in the planet's orbit. With this in mind, Yelazaya gave her orders decisively: fire. Strike hard. In the next 20 minutes, we must execute at least 5 rounds of maximum firepower at the surface. We must prevent the forces of the demons from rising again on Rage Owl Star. Yes. Major Dus Heshan did not have any objections. Chapter 332. Terrible fire from the heavens rained down upon the sea. Colonel Yelazaya's orders received the resolute execution of all officers and soldiers aboard the Claw-Fierce Tiger. 20 minutes, 5 rounds of firepower, what does that mean? It was roughly equivalent to a full-force bombardment by the quintet, minus the firepower of the high-caliber Wrath of Loyalty and Hot Hammer. 100 scalpel missiles, about half of what the quintet would launch in one volley, 100 hits from the Defender kinetic cannon, actually slightly less effective than the scalpel missiles, but could arguably be considered about the same. While the total firepower was much less, the key point was that the target area for the quintet back then was much larger. Back then, there was an entire urban cluster with many pre-war buildings remaining, which objectively provided cover for those greenskins, making the firepower cost-effective ratio quite low. But here, the space was small. 2 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide, at most the size of a village town. The firepower that came down packed a considerable punch for each unit of space. Madden sat aboard the Wind Falcon, silently watching. In fact, he couldn't see much. When the first round of strikes hit, the sky was filled with smoke, flames, and the sea platform, especially the central spire area, was densely covered. With the experience and vision of a battle group leader, he could fully judge that the intensity of the current strikes was far more than necessary. Technically, he could have been the real man who doesn't look back at explosions now. But in reality, he couldn't. The current firepower against this complex of buildings was enough. But nobody could guarantee whether it could deal a fatal blow to the demon engines and great unclean ones hidden in the deepest part of the buildings. This was Madden's greatest uncertainty. He had witnessed the strength of a great demon. Although the ones encountered today, compared to that world destroyed by the plague demon, were much weaker, otherwise he would have been slashed with a single blow. But even so, he was still worried. Mainly because the memories of the past sieges were just too terrifying. A great demon capable of withstanding battleship bombardments with its flesh. Truly killing one, even with several battle group champions working together, was exceedingly difficult. Perhaps only those legendary warriors chosen by the Emperor could manage a one-on-one victory. But the champions chosen by the Emperor. Such top-tier warriors who could bear this title and power were scarce, with only one having emerged in the entire history of the Phoenix that spanned thousands of years. Certain battle groups with a shorter history might never have had such a warrior from their founding till now. Therefore, he was reluctant to leave. He made an effort to eat a lot of nutrition paste and synthetic starch, replenishing the essential energy his body needed. The evolved superhuman organs of a star warrior, iron stomach, rapidly digested the food, converting it into energy. Although it was not guaranteed, who knew if a desperate battle would ensue later? He needed to keep himself in as good a state as possible. Maddens had already decided that after the orbital bombardment, he would go and investigate the effects of the firepower in person. He hoped the effects would be good. 20 minutes passed quickly, and after various booming explosions, when the smoke cleared, the Wind Falcon took them back over the sea area. The sea platform had changed beyond recognition from its original appearance. Those pipelines, storage tanks, and sea surface structures had been almost completely destroyed by the terrifying firepower. Enjoy new chapters from Empire. The undead within the tanks were now physically liberated. Those aberrant beasts and cultists who had previously survived could certainly not have lived through such an onslaught. But these were not what the crew of the Wind Falcon were focusing on. Maddens gazed at the central building of the sea platform, which had been completely demolished. The surging sea water had already filled that area. Just by looking at it, there was no way to tell anything. He ordered the Wind Falcon to descend. The Special Forces elites of the 10th Expeditionary Force couldn't help much with what was to come, so there was no need for them to go down either. Maddens, with his 3 battle brothers, left the Wind Falcon and jumped onto the sea platform, now completely unrecognizable. The main structure here had already been destroyed by the orbital strike and was slowly sinking. More and more water was flooding in, and at the current rate, in no more than 30 minutes, the support structures below would lose all effectiveness, and the entire sea platform would completely sink to the seabed. But this did not affect what they were going to do next. Maddens led his team through a blasted, water-filled breach into the sea platform. As Star Warriors, their training, of course, was to cope with all kinds of combat environments in space. The life support systems of their power armor allowed them to operate in the strong acidic seas of some planets, let alone the ordinary seawater of Rage Owl Star. And after switching to underwater combat mode, several tons of metal could still move in the water, though not as conveniently. After entering the underwater environment, they spent some time finding the original battleground. The process was tough, the previous bombardment had completely destroyed the structure here. Trying to locate the original spot was like navigating a maze, compounded with the task of breaking through obstructions. Chapter 333. But after some time, they still managed to do it. Upon finding the original spot, they saw a body that had mostly dissipated, presumably that of the great demon. It was completely unrecognizable. In Rizzo's judgment, this was not due to being bombed, but rather, after the demon engine was destroyed and it lost its connection with the chaotic abyss, such impurities had no way to continue existing in the real world. What remained of its body was still rapidly evaporating. Next to it, they found fragments that seemed to be the remnants of the destroyed demon engine. The abyssal rift had disappeared. So, this should count as a success, right? Maddens asked, somewhat uncertain. Rizzo closed his eyes, carefully sensed his surroundings, and replied, it should be. Then I'm relieved. Just then, Maddens received another communication from the Wind Falcon, which was relayed twice, originating from Revival City. Governor Guhang had sent the message to the starship then transmitted it to the Wind Falcon, and the Wind Falcon relayed it to him. Bring back whatever the great demon's body leaves behind after it disappears. Maddens and Rizzo exchanged glances, both somewhat perplexed. They had just managed to clear the flooded ruins and had found this place, confirming their victory. How could Mr. Gu, thousands of miles away, be certain the great demon was dead? Guhang had seen it on the event panel. At first, he was unaware of any great demon, because after Maddens and the others broke into the lower levels of the central spire and encountered formidable enemies, they had no time to send out messages. It wasn't until the orbital bombardment was about to be executed that he received information from the Blade Tiger. Right after he got the message, his event panel updated with new information. Unclean One Ge-Wajia. Ge-Wajia is not the Unclean One's true name, but it is the name he currently uses. He is about to tear the veil between the abyss and reality, bringing his vast army to descend upon the Rage Owl Star. This is a catastrophic threat. What will you do? Gu Heng was genuinely startled the moment he saw this message. My goodness, could this be any more thrilling? What does Rage Owl Star have to deserve the attention of a great demon? What is wrong with this planet that it encounters all kinds of monstrous deities? To be honest, if Gu Heng didn't have the system, he would have died countless times upon coming here. Even with his extraordinary abilities, having resolved many issues that multiple previous governors could not fix and having united the alliance and all the surviving forces, if either the green skin disaster or the demon disaster had taken root, that would have been the end. Even then, with the system, neither the green skin calamity nor the demon calamity was something that a still developing Rage Owl Star could perfectly resolve. In the rear, Gu Heng was even contemplating whether to fly personally to the south. After all, he was a level 5 spiritual energy user, an entity not inferior to Maddens in a one-on-one fight, which might be somewhat useful. In any case, should the worst happen, his fate would be sealed regardless. He'd either die on Rage Owl Star fighting an endless number of demons or perish under the subsequent Empire's judgment. With such significant issues arising on the planet that might even affect other star sectors, he, as the governor, wouldn't escape responsibility. In any case, the matter had to be resolved in its incipient stage. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. About an hour after he was on tenterhooks, a new message appeared on his event panel. Unclean One Ge-Wajia, resolved. The Unclean One Ge-Wajia has been driven back to the chaotic abyss. This time, he would need to recuperate for a while. Reward, 7777 blessing points. Selectable blessing, after driving away Ge-Wajia, the chaos essence he couldn't escape from has condensed on his rusty greatsword. Spending 777 blessing points you can transform it into a holy artifact weapon suitable for humans. Continue your adventure at Empire. Looking at this message, Gu Heng felt a chill run down his spine. The number of blessing points offered as a reward was substantial, but something about this number seemed odd. And besides, the essence of chaos left behind by a plague great demon being used for a holy artifact, for a weapon? Are you eager to die? The required divine gift points are also 777. However, Gu Heng noticed the phrase usable by humans mentioned in the description. If that's the case, it seems, maybe, probably, it could really work? The thing is, sacred artifacts were something he had only heard of in legends. What if it's really powerful? It's just 777 divine gift points anyway, and if spent, so be it. After all, he still had 7,000 left. So, he gritted his teeth and exchanged for the optional reward. Inferior Sacred Artifact, Purifying God Plague Greatsword, Imitation. Containing a small portion of the chaotic origin from a major unclean entity, it can be used by humans after being purified. The holder gains the effect of +2 to physical constitution and +2 to spirit, which ceases to function if either attribute exceeds 22 points. The holder is immune to plagues and diseases. The Great Sword has a gravity-like field. It also has a guaranteed hit feature that can be activated once a day. Even after purification, an inferior sacred artifact has a very low probability of becoming a bridge to the abyss, causing the owner to occasionally hear whispers from its original master. Those with unstable wills should not use it. Looking at this thing, Gu Heng felt a bit of a toothache. The artifact was strong, especially in the hands of someone who was already powerful. A dual boost of +2 to both spirit and physical attributes meant that the holder's physical and spiritual prowess could more than double on their existing basis according to the system's calculations. With it, Gu Heng would effectively gain an entire level. With it, a squadron champion like Maddens could reach the true strength level of a Starship Warrior squadron leader. But, Gu Heng was quite conflicted and hesitant about the part of this inferior sacred artifact saying it could be influenced by the abyss. He didn't want to use it himself. On one hand, he wasn't a warrior, and the enhancements to his physical attributes, the latter two features, were of no use to him. Besides, the chances of him having to fight personally on the battlefield in the future probably wouldn't be too high. The main effectiveness of the equipment he could utilize would be those 2 points in spirit. On the other hand, Gu Heng didn't want to personally test whether he was susceptible to abyssal corruption. He didn't think of himself as a person with an unstable mind, but it wasn't necessary to gamble, not even on a 1 in 10,000 chance. The most suitable person to use this inferior sacred artifact was Maddens. But that guy? Gu Heng was worried about his level of willpower. A starship warrior who had gone through a penitent expedition and was now tasked with rebuilding a combat team, who also had the level of a squadron champion, should absolutely be a person of firm will. However, after arriving at Rage Owl Star, Maddens's performance, which had been influenced by Gu Heng's psychological tactics, made it difficult to fully trust him. Even though the chance of the abyss whispering was already very low, Maddens's chance of corruption was also very low. But as long as it wasn't zero, Gu Heng was reluctant to take the risk. Having an extra piece of powerful equipment was good, but it wouldn't be worth it if it caused serious issues. Maddens could stick with his fine work dynamo sword. Did I just waste over 700 divine gift points for nothing? If it's wasted, so be it. Better to have the sword kept in the sea, a sword with a great demon's essence, who knows what trouble it could cause otherwise. It's been purified by the system and then collected, kept under strict supervision, which is better than letting it be out there. Gu Heng could only console himself in this way. Overall, the gains were significant. An enormous divine gift reward, the largest and most unexpected reward Gu Heng had ever received. He felt as though he had struck it rich. An inferior sacred artifact that seemed unusable but at least posed no hidden risks. And the greatest gain of all was averting a potential world-ending crisis. Chapter 334. Flying Wing Star, the Gu family residence. A middle-aged woman, wrapped in a bathrobe, nestled on the sofa, looking through a stack of letters and reports. As she read the first half, her brows were tightly furrowed. But as she got to the latter half, her expression relaxed. Seeing the lady of the house's dramatic change in expression, the standing housekeeper couldn't help but ask, "Is it news about Heng?" Said the middle-aged woman, who was Gu Heng's mother, Wang Qi, as she casually passed the correspondence to her confidant. "You take a look too." The housekeeper received the letters, read them thoroughly, and couldn't help but show shock on her face. The appearance of a great demon on Rage Owl Star, the opening of a demonic rift, such news, of course, was heart-wrenching. But since the matter was resolved, that was good. She patted her chest, calming the aftershock of her fear, and handed the correspondence back to the lady of the house, saying, "The things Heng has done are too thrilling. We should still find a way to have Heng return, so we wouldn't have to live in fear every day. It's not that easy, a planetary governor's position isn't something one can simply step down from. But it's good, that brat went to a remote and desolate place and actually became sensible and accomplished. Going out to gain experience, a big change for the better, is certainly better than all those useless years he spent here on Flying Wing Star." At this, she couldn't help but feel melancholy again. Why couldn't it have been sooner? If her son had been sensible earlier, if he had shown his maturity, his responsibility, his capabilities sooner, she wouldn't have had to exhaust herself these past years. She could have gradually handed over many matters to him. The housekeeper had been with Wang Qi for many years and could semi-guess what her mistress was worried about. She thought for a moment and cautiously suggested an idea: "What if we still give Heng a hand?" Wang Qi looked up at her long-serving subordinate and asked, "Help? How do you suggest we help?" Continue reading at Empire. She actually started to think it over. Perhaps we could help Heng's planet by building some factories under the guise of aid? If ownership is tricky, we could put them under a new Gu commercial fleet, dedicated to serving Heng. Building factories, too few is pointless, and too many, how could the family ever approve such an investment plan? Avoiding investments in heavy assets other than the fleet is the Gu family's principle. While saying this, Wang Qi let out a derisive chuckle, seemingly somewhat scornful of the idea. However, she eventually sighed, "That won't work, at least not now." Her gaze turned toward the window. "I need to resolve the issue at hand first. If it all goes well, what's ours will be ours in the future, without having to heed the meddling of those old fogies." Upon hearing this, the housekeeper became anxious. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Should we tell Heng about this matter? He's a governor now, perhaps he could offer some help." "Don't," Wang Qi said decisively, "not a word. You're worried he'll still be influenced by his uncles, his older male cousins? But it seems Heng has grown a lot now, he probably won't. Better safe than sorry. Once my affair is settled, he might hate me, but no matter what, the entire Gu family will be his." The housekeeper wanted to persuade further, but seeing Wang Qi's demeanor, she ultimately held back her words, only lamenting, I hope Hang will understand your good intentions. Wang Qi scoffed, no need for his understanding, I'm merely transferring what should have been my husband's to his son. That brat, he better not cause me any trouble. The housekeeper bowed her head but couldn't help rolling her eyes. This mother and son, each was more stubborn than the other. All right, you may go now. I'll rest for a bit myself. Okay. With the mistress dispatching her, the housekeeper did not linger and turned to leave. Wang Qi, left alone, couldn't resist picking up the already read letter and going through it from start to finish once more. Then, she stood up, took a wooden box from the bookshelf next to her, opened it and placed the correspondence inside. This wooden box was already filled with a thick stack. Gu Hang, far away on Rage Owl Star, had no clue what his old mother was planning, let alone the big trouble she was preparing to stir up for him. At that moment, he was discussing the affairs of the Green Valley region with his team of bureaucrats after multiple rounds of deliberations. He had thought, after having demolished the stronghold of the Nature Salvation Society and banished the prominent aberrants back to the chaotic abyss, that things in the south would settle down. But they had not. There was a fundamental problem with that land, the aberrant beasts. After hearing from Hu Ke, Gu Hang roughly understood that the aberrant beasts on Rage Owl Star were not the doings of the Nature Salvation Society, nor of demons. Essentially, they were a climatic disaster that appeared following the ecological collapse of Rage Owl Star. Rage Owl Star was once a developed world of energy extraction, the spiritualized gas fields were its main output. The barrier between Rage Owl Star and the dark side of the universe, and the spirit realm, seemed particularly thin. In the thinnest places, the energy of the spirit realm pierced the barriers of the two worlds, congregating in a certain area, and over the years, formed the spiritualized gas fields. Chapter 335. However, after the last disaster, most of the spirit energy fields on Rage Owl Star had collapsed. The howling, unconstrained force of spiritual energy formed various strange disasters. Low-energy storms are the most typical, and they are still whirling around the high tower ruins outside Rubbish Town. The energy collection devices placed there, and the energy compression equipment, ensure a monthly output of energy crystals worth about 80,000 tax currency. This is hard currency. And the aberrant beasts, which are very common throughout the wastelands and especially numerous in the Green Valley region, are actually plants that have been influenced and animated by spiritual energy. Ge Wajia utilized these things and, with his technical knowledge and what he called the grace of the benevolent father, he disseminated a certain virus capable of controlling these plants into the vast forests of the Green Valley. But now, Ge Wajia was dead, the great demon he summoned had been banished, and the influence of the chaotic abyss that eroded reality in the Green Valley region no longer existed. This meant that the supernatural virus that had widely spread and infected most of the aberrant beasts lost its foundation and vanished. However, the central nervous systems of those mutated creatures, reformed by the virus, did not recover. Aberrant beasts with a missing piece in their central nervous systems all went mad. They wildly charged out of the woods, attacking all living beings. Without any rhyme or reason, without any plan. To tell you the truth, these monsters were not difficult to handle. Although among them there were many special breeds developed over the years by the Nature Salvation Society, with formidable strengths. However, mindless things, no matter how powerful, could still be dealt with. Not to mention, they were even more mindless than before. After all, although previously the aberrant beasts lacked the ability for independent thought, they still had their controllers. In the past, almost every large-scale operation of the aberrant beasts showed traces of the followers of the benevolent father. With the control virus, they could roughly direct the actions of the entire monster group. It was because of this, they could put out cannon fodder in front, cover the pus spewers as they approached to shoot, the bio-artillery bombarded from a distance, the zombie dogs waited for the right moment to launch deadly assaults when the enemy's formation was in chaos, causing heavy casualties. However, after the loss of the cultists' control, these brainless creatures even lacked that bit of the most basic tactical coordination ability. In front of the army, weren't they just beasts waiting to be slaughtered? There was just one problem, their numbers were far too many. According to Hu Ke's calculations and estimates, there might be between 150 million to 300 million various types of aberrant beasts living in the vast jungles of the Green Valley region. This was a terrifying number, much greater than the population of the entire planet. It was 30 times the total population of the Green Valley region. Even the Nature Salvation Society only had the ability to infect most of the aberrant beasts, not to command so many creatures at once. But now, when these creatures lost control and madly rushed out, the trouble was enormous. No matter how stupid, the sheer number of 150 million to 300 million made producing enough bullets and shells to eliminate them take who knows how long. However, thankfully, when these creatures went berserk, they didn't recognize kin and didn't just target humans or other life forms, they attacked their own kind just as indiscriminately. It was also because of this, the pressure faced by the Central Group Army in the Green Valley region was relatively weaker. Luckily, the Viking Valley region had executed large-scale terraforming works to eradicate the jungle, and the number of aberrant beasts there had been reduced. All the settlements and towns began to tighten their defenses, not venturing out unless necessary. The military then staunchly defended each node, ready to call for fire support when waves of creatures attacked. The Alliance's Air Force squadrons were incredibly busy, striking everywhere. Even the Blade Tiger in the sky would occasionally help by launching a few surgical strikes to clear large concentrations of enemies. The unrest in the Green Valley region lasted for a full 3 months before it gradually subsided. After these 3 months, the settlements reported fewer and fewer sightings of aberrant beasts emerging. Under such circumstances, Gu Hang finally felt assured enough to call back the Central Group Army. Nevertheless, people still needed to be left behind in the Green Valley region. Hu Ke went on a business trip to the Green Valley region and, protected by the Special Combat Brigade, conducted field investigations in some jungles. He discovered that some aberrant beasts still survived. Although their numbers had greatly decreased, there was a possibility that they could breed again. However, without the influence of abyssal power, their breeding speed should not be especially fast. It wouldn't be easy for them to return to their original population size. Moreover, the central nervous systems of these aberrant beasts were gradually becoming free from the influence of the chaos virus after its disappearance, and they were becoming much calmer. If things go without accident, they should revert to their traditional patterns from decades ago, breeding normally in the jungles until the population reaches the environment's carrying capacity, then spilling out and forming waves of aberrant beasts. When the numbers drop significantly to a normal level, they would continue to breed in the jungles. Their breeding and growth rates are related to the seasons and sunlight. This is why the traditional waves of aberrant beasts are seasonal. If it is merely this way, these aberrant beasts will no longer pose too great a threat. After this wave of calamity, there probably aren't many survivors left in the South Green Valley region, and those still alive would have fled north. The Viking Valley region now has a population of about 8 million, and once the jungles and aberrant beasts are cleared out, there would only be issues from the south to deal with. The former Green Valley region had almost no industrial production capabilities, relying only on its own armed forces within each manor, so it was normal not to cope. Now, with the regular Alliance army present, the conventional, traditional waves of aberrant beasts will be annihilated as soon as they emerge from the jungles. Enjoy exclusive adventures from Empire. For this reason, Gu Hang still had to leave a force in the Green Valley region. He kept the 15th to 25th Divisions, which were established from the Green Valley region, and formed the Green Valley Garrison Group Army. All 11 divisions were garrison divisions, cheap but sufficient. They would be responsible for the long-term defense of the Viking Valley region. In fact, the best way to deal with the aberrant beasts was to penetrate the jungles and eradicate them at the roots. But that was clearly not likely. The Green Valley region was too vast, and with the current total number of troops under Gu Hang's command not yet exceeding 200,000, it was not feasible to accomplish such a task. Moreover, according to Hu Ke's assessment, aberrant beasts were a manifestation of spiritual energy disasters, and as long as the jungles remained, even if they were all killed, new ones would regenerate. If the jungles were cleared, then the aberrant beasts would indeed no longer regenerate, but the spiritual energy disasters would not subside and would most likely transform into low-energy storms. It would be better to clear the aberrant beasts on a regular basis every year. At least the eliminated aberrant beasts could be repurposed, turned into synthetic starch, and the land would become fertile. If it turned into low-energy storms, farming would become impossible. Gu Hang's vision for the entire Viking Valley region was to be the Alliance granary. With the Alliance having resolved the annual disaster of the aberrant beast waves and unified the whole region, establishing a singular government, agricultural productivity can be optimistically estimated to grow tremendously. If the entire Viking Valley region was turned into an agricultural zone, with a large number of farms built and some hub-type cities established mainly for transportation, trade, primary processing of agricultural products, and service industries, that would suffice. Crook Manor was also renamed Baegu City, serving as the capital of the Viking Valley province. Jason Morgan, who played a significant role in the recovery of the Viking Valley region and the quelling of disasters, was transferred out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. He was entrusted with the establishment of the Viking Valley Province government and took on the role of the first provincial governor. His rank also soared directly to C1 level. Jason Morgan felt that this appointment was within reason, but when it actually happened, it still seemed dreamlike. I was just an employee at a small company in Revival City, and in just a few months, I've become the head of a province. Chapter 336. Jason Morgan became the province governor, with a C1 level position. This was almost akin to stepping into the upper echelons of the Alliance official system. After all, any higher and one would only have the central minister of the Alliance, even higher, one would have to reach the level of Osania. Moreover, his position was particularly important. After the establishment of the Viking Valley Province, it became the most populous and largest province within the entire control area of the Alliance. The combined population of the three central provinces added up to only 6 million, 1 million of whom were migrants from the Viking Valley region. Under Morgan's jurisdiction, there were a full 8 million people. As long as he secured his position as the province governor, he would be a feudal lord within the Alliance, with an exceptionally high status. C1 level? This was merely a beginning. Of course, Jason Morgan was extremely delighted. Add latest chapters at Freeognovlo only. Who wouldn't want to hold high authority? It all seemed too dreamlike. The person he most wanted to thank now, other than the governor, was his wife, the current Dean of Academic Affairs at Wind Extinguishing Zongxi Academy, Hire S.I. Morgan. The series of decisions he made after the establishment of the Alliance were basically from his wife. Being the first to respond to the call of the Alliance without waiting and watching like others made him one of the first employees of the Alliance government. Actively participating in dangerous external assignments earned him multiple merits, striving to take part in the training at Wind Extinguishing Zongxi Academy, being dispatched to the Green Valley region. All these were what his wife had asked him to do. Among them, there were many things he was initially somewhat resistant to, yet ultimately, his wife pushed him into them. He had to admire having a wife with outstanding vision. It was an immense fortune. Overall, his promotion progressed as swiftly as a rocket. But in fact, each step he took along the way was solid. Many times, he faced life and death crises. Undeniably, there was an element of luck involved, riding the tide of the era, but when such a tide swept in, how many could really rise with the wind? He was one of them. He made many correct choices and shone in many critical moments. One could only say, he had scored big. But he was also aware of an even more important point: his past efforts had won him his current status. However, this was just the beginning. Whether he could develop further in the future would depend on the outcomes he could achieve within his first tenure as governor of Viking Valley Province. If he did well, he would continue upward. If not, he might not even be able to maintain his current position. The Alliance government probably couldn't accept a governor of the most populous province failing to achieve anything. The Alliance's emphasis on Viking Valley's development was evident to the naked eye. In the early days of the provincial government's establishment, Osania would fly to Bagu City every other day. Speaking of Osania, she also had a change of position over these 3 months. She was officially appointed as the Alliance Premier, becoming the top official in the administrative field. Her most important task, after being formally appointed, was to personally visit Viking Valley Province to guide the establishment of the provincial government and supervise the planning and construction of various levels of farms and hub cities. She was very motivated. She was originally from Green Valley, and felt an undeniable duty to rebuild her homeland. Gu Hang entrusted the administration and production reconstruction of the Viking Valley Province to his female premier and played the role of a hands-off manager. In reality, he didn't need to worry or get involved himself. Even if that newly promoted Jason Morgan wasn't reliable, Osania should be trustworthy. Moreover, Gu Hang could monitor the current reconstruction situation in Viking Valley in real time through the monthly fixed income of the Viking Valley Province displayed on the system interface. Monthly fixed income symbolized the population size, level of development, and encompassed factors such as public order, production, culture, happiness, and the quality of administrative management among others. This wasn't a metric that grew linearly, but in general, the better the development of a region, the higher the grace points it would provide. Currently, within the Alliance's rule, Wuxing City provided the highest monthly grace point with a population of approximately 1.65 million, contributing 773 grace points to Guamhang each month. 1 million of that population had recently migrated from the Green Valley region. Wuxing City was actively integrating these people into the real industrial populace. Next were Revival City and Viking Valley Province. The former provided 297 grace points with a population of just over 1 million, and the latter provided 417 points with 8 million people. Other places were more fragmented. The other areas of the Central Province, Jeoda Province, and Central North Province had a combined population of about 3.3 million, providing 322 grace points in total. The total amounted to 1,809 points. From this structure, it was still apparent that the Wuxing City industrial area, painstakingly built by Gu Hang, was very effective. Despite having a relatively smaller population, the grace points were plentiful. Wuxing City currently supplied the alliance with the bulk of its industrial goods, especially heavy industrial equipment. The role of Revival City was to focus on light industry, administrative center, along with the service industry. People from Wuxing City would take vacations to the central city area of Revival City to have fun. The other places were all subpar. Chapter 337. However, Gu Hang still held great expectations for the Biking Valley province. Unlike other areas, the Biking Valley region had a huge population base and an industrial foundation. Although it was an agricultural industry, as long as agriculture could prosper and enable the 8 million people on that nearly 3 million square kilometers of vast land to have an average of 500 mu of arable land each, they would be able to live an idyllic life. If that were the case, the per capita standard of living and the per capita agricultural output would both be very high. In terms of the overall system points supply, even if it was not as good as the heavy industrial center of Wuxing City, it should not be much less. In the past 3 months, Gu Hang's monthly system point income accumulated to 4,928 points. Adding to that the 7,000 point reward after the end of the Great Unclean One, Ge Wajia incident, that made it 11,928 points. But this was still far from the limit of the system points Gu Hang had in hand. After the turmoil in the Green Valley region ended, Gu Hang once again saw the war campaign settlement interface after a long time. Comprehensive victory, received 6,424 system points. Lost 11,288, killed 16.29 million, captured 0. Alliance Army. Since Gu Hang started executing his Green Valley strategy, especially since the Central Group Army moved south into the Green Valley region, almost half a year had passed. During this time, there were a series of battles by the Central Group Army against the aberrant beasts. And now, the system finally considers that the regular campaigns have mostly come to an end, and thus, the rewards for the entire campaign were settled. Killing aberrant beasts really wasn't lucrative, millions were killed, yet the system points earned were only over 6,000. But Gu Hang had nothing to regret. He was truly wealthy now. The total system points lying in his account had reached 18,352 points. Looking at this number, he always felt a sense of unreality. It seemed like just a short while ago, he was spending system points in the hundreds and thousands, meticulously calculating these precious system currencies and deciding where they should be allocated to contribute to the construction of his territory. And now, all of a sudden, the magnitude of the number had inflated to a terrifying 18,000 plus. This even made him somewhat bewildered for a moment. He had never been this rich, and he didn't even know how to spend so many system points. Of course, that was just a manner of speaking. In reality, he had no mind to personally attend to the construction issues of the Biking Valley region, mainly because his attention was occupied by so many system points. Spending money was quite a laborious task too. The first thing he did was to boost the number of new Star Warriors from 8 to a total of 22. This expenditure alone cost Gu Hang over 4,000 system points. Experience Tales at Empire. Of course, this also brought about approximately 600 T2 or T3 level special warfare elites. As of now, the 10th Brigade also had a strength of 1,000 men. Having gone through the battle against the Great Demon at the Maritime Ruins, Gu Hang once again realized just how important it was to have top-tier individual fighting forces like the Star Warriors. And even with the system's enhancement, the training of Star Warriors still required a relatively long cycle. Even though they were expensive, Gu Hang still wanted to have them ready in advance. Under ideal conditions, in another half year or so, the Phoenix battle group would be able to recover to a strength of 26 people. For a battle group, this was still scarce, but at least there would be 4 formal tactical squads. The reason for setting the number at 26, instead of more, was because Gu Hang had a total of only 22 sets of power armor, including the old armor left by the former Phoenix. If Gu Hang were to train more new blood for the battle group, once they grew up, there would be no power armor for them to use. Of course, if Gu Heng was really flush with resources, he could actually train even more new troops. These new soldiers could temporarily go without armor and then buy it later on. Or, once Gu Heng had the technology to manufacture power armor, this issue could be somewhat resolved. But for the moment, there was no great need. After all, no matter how many blessing points Gu Heng had left, there were plenty of places to spend them. The first thing to do was to expand the army. Not counting the militia in the Green Valley region that had not been fully disbanded, the alliance had a total of 25 division and brigade level units, amounting to a total force of 170,000 men. Gu Heng felt this number of troops was not quite enough. He had calculated that, according to the imperial tax currency, the total value of these 25 divisions should have already reached around 2.8 million tax currency. That meant that after another year, when the imperial tax officers arrived, if these troops were converted in place into a Star Realm Army Corps, then Gu Heng's first issue with the imperial tax would be resolved. But Gu Heng could not possibly just stop military development there. Two perspectives. Firstly, Rage Owl Star still had plenty of troubles. The eastern provinces hadn't been pacified, the Northlands remained unrest, the western desert was still in a state of independence, and Blackbird heavy industries on the far west was a big deal. There was no such thing as having too many troops. Moreover, Gu Heng also needed to worry that if his troops were converted locally into the Star Realm Army and one day actually got transferred away by the Imperial Military Department, leaving him without armed forces on the planet, what then? Based on the current population of the Alliance, which was over 14 million, Gu Heng planned to expand the regular army to a force of 300,000. He had already discussed this with Colonel Tadeus, the chief of the Military Affairs Department. The Alliance's army would gradually expand by another 13 division and brigade level units over the next 6 months. And also, he had to solve a problem that had long existed. Currently, within the Alliance's 25 land divisions, there were 4 types: mechanized combined brigades, motorized infantry divisions, garrison divisions, and special brigades. Except for the most unique, the singular 10th Special Warfare Brigade, out of the remaining 24 divisions, there were only 2 mechanized combined brigades, 4 motorized infantry divisions. The other 17 divisions were all garrison divisions. In the organization of the Alliance Army, a garrison division only has over 6,000 people, and the equipment is very cheap: G9 individual equipment package plus squad and platoon, support fire at company and battalion levels, plus some artillery, that's it. This is the most basic line-filling division. The term garrison itself represents the role Gu Heng assigned to them. In some places, it's enough just to hold the line. They are not the main force to be relied upon. However, the 13 divisions that Gu Heng was going to expand, numbered 2638, would be different. First, he expanded all motorized infantry divisions from 3 battalions to 4, bringing the full strength to 11,700 men. Next, he formed 9 new motorized infantry divisions, and 4 mechanized brigades. Counting the existing troops, the Alliance Army's total strength would reach a scale of 310,000 men. And among them, the main field forces, namely the motorized infantry divisions and mechanized brigades, would account for the majority, reaching a scale of 200,000 men. And to train these 13 divisions, as well as to fill out the rosters of all the previous divisions, the Alliance would need to recruit about 140,000 new soldiers to enter the military. To train this batch of recruits to T5 level, Gu Heng would spend 1,400 blessing points. Plus, it's conservatively estimated that it would take half a year to produce all the various equipment they needed. Of course, that's another matter if the productivity of Wuxing City has significantly improved during this time. When someone asks Gu Heng, "How many divisions do you have?" then Gu Heng could pat his chest and say, "I have 38 divisions." However, Gu Heng couldn't really just wait for several months until the troops were all ready before starting the next military action. In fact, after the end of the turmoil in the Green Valley region, the Central Group Army left 11 garrison divisions behind to stay and station locally, and the 7 main field battle divisions returned to the vicinity of Revival City. The soldiers were given half a month of leave to reunite with their families, spend some money buying things, and enjoy life a little. Then, they were reassembled and began advancing to the east. They would pass through the central North Province and enter the previously unstepped eastern provinces of the Alliance to reclaim that land. Chapter 338. The Central Group Army had their vacation, then replenished their ranks with new recruits from the training camps to make up for losses sustained in the battles in the Green Valley region, and set off for the eastern provinces. Their actions were very smooth, The connections between the eastern provinces and the central three provinces as well as Revival City were very close. The situation there was completely different from the Green Valley region. The food production capacity of the eastern provinces was rather weak, even weaker than that of the central three provinces. This was mainly because, in the pre-war era, the eastern provinces were the core urban areas on the main continent of Rage Owl Star, especially closer to the coastal areas. Unlike the central three provinces with only one urban relic, tower ruins, such relics were ubiquitous in the eastern provinces. Although there was still some flat plain soil suitable for agricultural production, the overall amount was not quite sufficient. The main food supply for the 5 to 6 million people living in the eastern provinces actually also depended on the Green Valley region. After the unrest in the Green Valley region, it was not surprising that a famine spread in the eastern provinces, leading to upheaval. Discover hidden content at Empire. The Union still had a kind heart. Gu Heng had always valued the population greatly. He did not want an uprising in the eastern provinces, leading to a great number of deaths from starvation, and then more deaths from fighting over food. A serious famine could even be more terrifying than the reduction of population caused by war. In this situation, under Gu Heng's direction, Bradford, who was effectively in charge of the Alliance Commerce Department, followed the governor's ideas and continuously supplied food to the eastern provinces. Initially, driven by his merchant nature, Bradford wanted to take this opportunity to sell food at a high price, which would surely lead to huge profits. However, this merchant instinct was fiercely criticized by Prime Minister Oceana. Amidst the criticism, Bradford finally remembered that he was no longer a merchant. He was in charge of the Commerce Department, true, but he was a politician now, and he needed to act according to political rather than commercial logic. For a long time in the past, the food supply provided to the eastern province was maintained through large import orders from the western desert. Recently, there were also increased imports from grain produced in the Viking Valley province. The Green Valley region had conducted their autumn harvest a few months ago, and despite the yield not being as high as in the bountiful years, it was at least sufficient to support the 14 million populations of the Union. And the abundant cleared jungles and trees, as well as the aberrant beasts that had been killed in previous wars, were all fed into the synthetic starch factories. About half a year ago, the Union had mastered the self-researched technology for producing synthetic starch. Every production line completed, a set would be sent to Viking Valley. Currently, the Viking Valley area had put into operation many large and small synthetic starch factories. The output of these synthetic starches was increasing. Including this not-so-tasty, but definitely life-sustaining food, the Green Valley region could produce more food than in the high-yield years. That was enough. The various food items exported in large quantities to the eastern provinces were mainly exchanged for various industrial raw materials on the business front. Industrial raw materials were the most important basic output of the eastern provinces, a traditional output. To put it bluntly, it was similar to the production mechanisms at tower ruins. It relied on garbage collecting. Supplying food at fair prices in exchange for industrial materials was a basic business not for profit, or rather, for normal profit. But as mentioned, since there were political considerations involved, it was essentially a political deal. Besides maintaining the millions of population in the eastern provinces from uncontrollable widespread famine and warfare, the extra profit not made from the business side needed to be earned back in other ways. Through increased trade actions, the Union established very profound influences in many settlements in the eastern provinces. Only the Union could provide abundant food supply, which forced many settlements to sell raw materials at fair prices to the Union. Of course, strictly speaking, this wasn't coercion, since food wasn't sold at inflated prices and raw materials weren't underpriced, it was a fair trade. However, some associated conditions, such as propagating the Union's system and reiterating that their own settlements were members of the Union, were mandatory. Don't underestimate these, for the will of the people is subject to change. In their own settlements, if one couldn't have enough food or clothing, had to pick garbage every day, faced wasteland mutant beasts, and worried about raiders, whereas in the Union, as long as one became a Union citizen, secured a rank, one would at least have no worries about food and clothing. As for work, could it be more arduous than picking garbage? Not to mention, as per Union propaganda, every rank had basic healthcare benefits, leaves. Compare the two, and it becomes clear which is preferable. And with the second point of propaganda, that one's own settlement is also a member of the Union. Wouldn't the low and even middle-class residents think, why is our standard of living so poor when we are all part of the Union? So, if one day the Union arrives, saying it wants to take over the entire settlement under its direct governance. Then, how strong could the resistance of the entire settlement be? Forget resistance, there would probably be welcoming parties everywhere. Beyond the minimal requirement of allowing union merchants to promote the union, there were other deeper cooperations as well. Chapter 339. For instance, they began to gradually accept the advisory influence of some officials dispatched from the alliance's various ministries and commissions. The official reason was to help these settlements build their homes and bring the alliance's advanced experience to them. Dispatched officials would not directly lead and manage each settlement, but rather acted as consultants, providing reasonable suggestions to the leaders of the settlements. That's how it was said, but in reality, it was indeed the case. However, in this process, the alliance's influence naturally strengthened further. Those who constantly listened to the advice of the alliance's dispatched officials and yearned for the alliance's system, what kind of strategy would they adopt when the alliance's troops arrived? In other words, the alliance's long-standing food trade strategy and the export of its values brought strong political influence expansion. In the past 6 months, they had laid a great foundation in the eastern provinces. In fact, if not for Governor Gu Hang's urgent push, the alliance might not even need military action. By simply fanning the flames at the right moment in the future, a revolution sweeping across the entire eastern provinces could easily annex the area, which covered millions of square kilometers and had a population of 6 million. Military action, then, was a double-edged sword. Indeed, it could speed up the process of bringing the entire eastern provinces under the alliance's rule, without waiting for that so-called right moment. But correspondingly, some who could potentially be persuaded might now end up standing on the opposite side of the alliance. It was of little consequence. At present, the newly planned units of the Alliance Army had not yet completed their reorganization, and corresponding weapons and equipment were still in production. The Central Group Army that had set out now, had only 7 divisions, amounting to over 70,000 people. But they still reported victory after victory. The eastern provinces were vast, and many urban ruins stood tall on desolate land, causing great geographical division. It was difficult for the various settlements to unite, and many places inherently lacked a strong will to resist. As a result, faced with the actions of the Central Group Army, many simply submitted without a fight. The alliance had corresponding policies for this. Those who did not resist were not considered enemies. Everyone from the populace to the original ruling class would receive relatively good treatment. As for those who resisted, they were vastly overestimating their own strength. To put it plainly, even if the entire population of the eastern provinces, all 6 million people, gathered together, they could at most assemble a few 100,000 soldiers, with their terrible arms and logistics, and the fact that the alliance could immediately starve more than half of them by cutting off food supplies, they had no capacity to resist. Not to mention, they couldn't even unite. Yan Fangxiu's forces made rapid progress in the east. Often within a few hours, they would report having taken 1 or 2 settlements. Later on, Yan Fangxiu himself began to feel embarrassed by the constant stream of good news. What's there to boast about? Just station a regiment near a settlement, without firing a single shot, and they would surrender in 3 minutes. Those with a bit more backbone might endure a couple of barrages from the regiment's artillery and a few scare shots from the infantry whose actions were more about intimidation than assault, before surrendering in 15 minutes. If any dared to stubbornly resist to the end, they would be killed. All the rebels would be wiped out, all leaders captured, and there was no need to send them back to Revival City for prosecution, they were executed on the spot. The local population, depending on the situation, would be distributed to other camps. This could be described as swift and severe measures. Even when only a regiment was deployed for an operation, it often took less than a day to finish the task. In any case, no matter the situation, there were corresponding, well-established methods of handling it. This set of strategies, which they had effortlessly applied when reclaiming the 2 million population of the central province, was nothing more than repeating it again on a larger scale in the more spread-out population of the eastern provinces. Such victorious reports really didn't seem to warrant being passed on any further. Latterly, Yan Fangxiu simply made a summary-style military report every week, and that was that. Gu Hang was too lazy to look through Yan Fangxiu's various reports. It was nothing new, today a city was taken, tomorrow a town, nothing interesting. To tell the truth, he had no doubts whatsoever that the Central Group Army could easily flatten the entire eastern provinces without a hitch. The only thing to worry about was that nothing like a god or a devil should pop up from the east. Just the local survivor forces alone posed no threat at all. He was still fussing over how to spend his remaining favor points. In areas such as Phoenix New Blood, the construction of the 10th Special Warfare Brigade, and the expansion of the Alliance Army, Gu Heng had spent around 5,500 points of favor. He still had over 12,000 points left in his hands. And he planned to invest all these favor points into the construction of his territory in one go. This was divided into two parts, technology and building enhancements. First, about the building enhancements. After the war settlement in Green Valley region, Gu Heng found that 3 new types of buildings had appeared in the building interface. They were Farm-I, National Church, and Court of Justice. Gu Heng guessed that the farm buildings became available because, after he secured the Green Valley region, the area dedicated to agricultural production had greatly increased, reaching a certain target built into the system, thereby unlocking the farm building's achievement. The Farm-I building, like the civilian Factory I and military Factory I he had already unlocked, spent 100 points of favor on an existing and operational farm to increase its production to a certain extent. Previously, he didn't have the extra favor points to spend on these production-enhancing buildings, but now he had a considerable amount, so he could afford to use them. After some thought, he did not exchange for any farm buildings. It wasn't necessary. According to a rough report recently sent back from Viking Valley Province, it mentioned the production plan for the coming year. Based on an optimistic estimate, in the next year, the total value of the food production in Viking Valley region, including agricultural produce and synthetic starch, could reach around 6 million tax currency. With the imports from Western Desert and some of the food production from the central provinces added together, the food would amount to a value of about 3 million tax currency. This batch of food was sufficient to support a population of over 18 million in comfort, which was at the Alliance E9 food supply level, with a bit of attention to food rationing and supply at the subsistence level, or Alliance E5 level, it would sustain over 27 million people, and if one were to be a bit more draconian, at the starvation prevention level, or Alliance E3 level, that would be enough to feed 45 million people. Even if you added the 6 million from the entire eastern provinces, the total population of the Alliance would still be around 20 million. It was more than enough. Instead, industrial production, and military production in particular, always seemed insufficient. The production in civilian factories mainly revolved around various consumer goods. These items, whether used to pay taxes where the Empire also accepted them or used in interstellar trade, were in lesser demand. Trading them didn't fetch high prices, and the tax value assessed by the Empire also tended to be lower than their actual production value. However, the opposite was true for weaponry. It was the hard currency of interstellar trade, a hot commodity in trade deals, and the Empire gave full tax value for it. In this situation, Gu Heng exchanged 16 military factories and 4 civilian factories all at once. The former were all applied to the various military industries in Wuxing City. The latter would be allocated to basic heavy industries like clay and plastic steel smelting, as well as metalworking. Not to mention that the monthly production of the Wind Falcon in the Alliance had risen to 10 units. After swapping for these 20 enhancement cards for factories, the yearly industrial output of Wuxing City was estimated to increase by about 400,000 tax currency. And the cost was only 2,000 favor points. He still had 10,000 points left. Gu Heng did not divert these 10,000 favor points elsewhere. Instead, he used them all on the tech card lottery. The thrilling moment of the draw had arrived, and Gu Heng was rubbing his hands together with eagerness. Chapter 340. If it comes to drawing technology cards, currently, Gu Heng's first choice would certainly still be the 1000 tier. The 10 and 100 stores are no longer under consideration, both prize pools have been drained, leaving a too low probability of good items emerging to be worth the gamble. Currently, for the 1000 tier, the probability of getting items is as follows: for basic level, 40%, for intermediate level, 30%, for elite level, 20%. There's also a 10% chance that, unluckily, it would come up empty. And Gu Heng's first 3 draws, luck wasn't great. Didn't come up empty, but there was no jackpot either, 1 intermediate level and 2 basic level items. The intermediate level technology was for the Lion Tank. At this reward, Gu Heng couldn't stop smiling. This was an armored force that the Star Realm Army had equipped for a long time, a genuine tank, wholly different in concept from the old Challenger imported by the old Alliance Army. Even though within the Star Realm Army's arsenal, the Lion Tank is only considered a light tank. But a light tank is still a tank, possessing both thick armor and powerful firepower. The Challenger tank's armor could be penetrated by an interstellar warrior's explosive rifle, but such rifles would merely tickle the Lion tank. Even heavy explosives or plasma guns of that caliber couldn't threaten the tank through its frontal armor. The Alliance's currently equipped 155mm howitzers are also nothing but an annoyance to the Lion. On the offensive side, it boasts a 125mm kinetic main cannon using magrail cannon technology, which can be outfitted with a plasma cannon. It is equipped with 2 heavy explosive coaxial machine guns, possesses smokescreen active defense, special Surmet armor protection. Such a king of land warfare cannot be compared with the Strider armored vehicle. The Star Realm Army is known as the Hammer of the Empire for a good reason, with formidable armored capability at its core. Without these heavy tanks, how could the Star Realm Army contend with the fearful entities of the universe with mere human flesh and blood? And now, the Alliance Army finally has real tanks. Moreover, Gu Heng calculated that the Alliance could directly set up production lines for the Lion tank. They were capable of producing basic Surmet and grindstone engines. With the Lion tank's technological blueprints, the Alliance could also replicate the main cannon, setting up a separate production line for it. This could even optimize the Alliance's own artillery technology. However, equipping it with plasma cannons was impractical since the Alliance couldn't produce them yet, unless they chose to use the black box to directly manufacture parts for the Lion tank with a plasma cannon option, but that output would be pitifully low. But there was no need for that, the magrail cannon and heavy explosive rifles were already powerful weapons. And the 2 basic level technologies were both related to production, superconducting power grid and basic engineering machinery. Both of these are foundation building technologies. The former, as the name implies, is a type of technology for constructing power grids. Compared to the current traditional power grid construction technology used by the Alliance, its main features are less energy loss, stronger load capacity, and the ability to conveniently perform wireless charging. The latter is a type of engineering machinery. By equipping different sets of tools, it could function as an excavator, road paver, among many other types of engineering machinery. And these could be used for various purposes, but Gu Heng saw that they were mostly used for basic projects such as laying roads, railways, tracks, and the like. These 2 foundation building technologies are very important. As the Alliance's controlled land area and population grow, some basic infrastructure constructions began to be insufficient. The most direct example is the Alliance's current power grid, which barely covers the Twin Cities and Rubbish Town. Other settlements in the central 3 provinces are still not electrified, not to mention the more distant Biking Valley province. It's not that there isn't technology to build power grids, it's just that construction takes time, and a large portion of the Alliance's efforts is focused on other areas that require development. The power grid project has been placed on hold. After all, apart from the Twin Cities, the productivity of those other small and medium-sized settlements, even if preserved as much as possible, is still weak, so rushing to electrify them doesn't hold high value. The same is true for the road and rail networks. But obviously, this isn't a long-term solution. Gu Heng wasn't planning on following the mold of some nest capital worlds, where building just one super metropolis would suffice. Super cities, of course, serve their important purpose. A more dense population and industries lead to stronger cluster effects. However, regions like the Biking Valley Agricultural Zone and the Eastern Province's industry for recycling pre-war urban ruins are all indispensable. Now, transport relies on the iron bull trucks, chugging along muddy, dirt, and gravel roads. Though it's already more reliable than the old beast-drawn carts of past years, it's still not fast enough, at least not for an industrial system, it's too insufficient. Moreover, Gu Heng wasn't just concerned with the development of the Twin Cities. Considering the entire Alliance's productive capacity, not to mention this year's taxation being problem-free and future tax revenues could be offset by stuffing forces into the troops of the Star Realm Army Corps being established, the Alliance's annual gross production value was still only 1.2 million tax currency. Chapter 341. Gu Heng was responsible for the tax revenue of 50 million people on the planet, netting 5 million tax currency annually. If not for the cheating capability in military training provided by the system, and the additional help of the operational Star Realm Army Corps, his days would have been incredibly tough. An annual output of 12 million tax currency, if 5 million had to be paid in taxes, would leave his subjects in a state not much better than destitution. Of course, there were some other objective factors involved. He only had 14 million people under him, and the planet was not yet unified, there were a large number of human resources not yet under his control. But at the same time, there was another problem: the disparity in development levels across different regions of the alliance was too great. In Wuxing City's heavy industry zone, the per capita annual output could reach 1.6 tax currency. For Revival City, it was only 1.02. These two were still in the positive, reaching the quota set during the establishment of the imperial tax standard, which considered the total annual production per person as one tax currency. But other areas could not even reach one. All regions of the alliance still had significant room to improve production efficiency. If you want to be prosperous, build roads first. An extensive electrical grid could transmit the power from the nuclear reactors constructed outside Revival City without loss and at a high load to every piece of land in the alliance. Extensive road and railway networks would greatly enhance the efficiency of material transport. The saying that roads are the arteries of industry is no idle talk. It's necessary to connect all areas so that Wuxing City's advanced industrial system can better promote the development of all other towns. At the same time, more developed roads, railways, and energy transmission lines will in turn feed back into Wuxing City, the industrial hub, for its further improvement. This was what the Alliance Development Department had planned to do next. And the two new technologies just obtained, without a doubt, could accelerate this process greatly. Gu Heng was looking forward to a further increase in the output of Wuxing City's industrial core and also to the development of other regions of the Alliance, hoping they could benefit significantly from the abundance of logistics and energy. After an average haul in the first 3 draws, Gu Heng's luck took a turn for the better. In the next 7 draws, he hit 2 elite level, 2 advanced level, and 3 basic level technologies. The 3 basic levels were construction engineering machinery, agricultural machinery technology, and servant mech transformation technology. There's no need to elaborate on construction engineering machinery, it's a significant boon. All around the Alliance, there was a need for development, even in Wuxing City, which already resembled an industrial center, where new house construction was in constant demand. The building of housing districts to accommodate a significant population increase, factory buildings, and various types of public facility construction. The Alliance's construction teams were among the busiest groups. In fact, they didn't have much time to build residential areas, spending most of their efforts on constructing factory buildings. Wuxing City now had a population of 1.6 million, but most of them didn't even have a simple shack to live in. Slums built with scraps of waste materials were scattered around the outskirts of the city. This was clearly unacceptable. These people, just escaped from peril and from various places, may now have a stable job, steady food supply, and even some extra allowances to purchase some consumer goods that they could not have imagined or seen before. However, as time goes by, people's demands for a better life will only increase. An improvement in living conditions is an essential step. In fact, in Wuxing City, there were many housing plans already. At present, the entire city was planned according to the specifications of a 5 million strong industrial population for various functional zones. It was just that there had never been enough construction teams to build them. Now, with a series of construction engineering machinery, the efficiency of each construction team should be greatly improved, and this issue should be resolved. Agricultural machinery technology also arrived at just the right time. Tractors and accompanying equipment for cultivating, sowing, weeding, fertilizing, harvesters, balers. This series of agricultural production machinery was timely. The Biking Valley province will have a great need for these agricultural machines. Their arrival will directly transform the many years of manual and animal-driven farming in the Biking Valley province into mechanized agricultural production. Theoretically, the maximum per capita land area in the Biking Valley province reaches 500 acres, it is estimated that about 1/5 of that is cultivable land. In the past, this was just a theoretical value, as vast amounts of land were jungles that couldn't be utilized. The constant threats from raiders and aberrant beasts meant small farms couldn't survive. The exploitation by plantation owners tied the population to a limited amount of land. But now, these circumstances have changed. A large amount of jungle has been cleared, and the uncleared areas are waiting to be cleared. The threat from raiders and aberrant beasts has essentially been eliminated. The plantation owners have been wiped out as a class, replaced by local officials of the Alliance who draw from the Alliance's finances rather than the surplus value of the land. Although there might still be corruption, and a lot of land may still not be utilized. Overall, it is very possible to develop more farms and farmland. 8 million people, in relation to 3 million square kilometers of fertile land, that's sparsely populated. It's definitely impossible to cover with manual farming. This has to be shifted to mechanized, large-scale farming. Once agricultural production is fully mechanized, given Green Valley region's natural conditions, the pastoral lifestyle for every person there would no longer be a dream. It might even be possible within the next 2 years. A family of 4 to 5 people, with 2 or 3 laborers, could lease 1,000 acres of land, become full-time farmers engaged in fully mechanized production and plant the high-yield seeds previously imported from the Cousins merchant ship. The annual grain output of the land could probably reach 50 tax currency, even if the empire were to be a bit greedy, and there was a big difference between market selling price and purchase price, that would still be at least equivalent to 20-30 tax currency. If currently in the Viking Valley province, there's an assessed 1.2 billion acres of cultivatable land, and if all of it could be put to use, that's an annual output value of 60 to 30 million tax currency. Just this food production alone would not only be able to feed everyone on Rage Owl Star, but there would also be enough surplus to pay the entire planet's imperial tax. Moreover, after paying the tax, there could still be a large surplus to store, to give to the empire in exchange for tax currency, to engage in interstellar trade. Food, in the whole star sea, is a bona fide currency. Actually, Gu Heng had been considering this for a while. Even if he hadn't won the agricultural machinery technology in the lottery, he would have had the 2 technical officers under him, namely Wu Jiarong and Hu Kei, fully tackle the relevant technology. This was a true path to prosperity. And now, having won it directly from the lottery was certainly the best outcome. It saves Gu Heng from waiting for them to develop it. He could use it right away. As for the final servant mech transformation technology, Gu Heng didn't really care for it. It's not that it's useless. Back when he started, he used servo soldiers as well. Although they lacked intelligence and didn't think proactively, they counted as qualified soldiers, servants, laborers. But Gu Heng was not too keen on it. The Mechanical Cult Guild liked using servant mechs, but Gu Heng really did not. This technology needed only slight development. In the future, it may, like the servo skull manufacturing technology, be reserved as punishment for criminals. Condemned prisoners would be put to good use. For ordinary people, Gu Heng would not allow the occurrence seen on some planets, where living beings can be bought and sold, and innocent people could be turned into servo skulls or servant mechs. In his view, a living, normal human being can create more value than a servant mech. As for servo skulls, those biological computers, wetware, indeed have high value but are relatively less versatile in their applications. Donations from death row inmates, terminal patients, and the elderly whose life is nearing its end would suffice. Apart from these 3 fundamental technologies, Gu Heng also won 2 elite level 1s, Transition Identification System and Starport Blueprint, and 2 advanced level 1s, Reflector Orbital Air Defense System and Chainsaw Sword Technology. Chapter 342. Among these 4 high-level technologies, Gu Heng's attention was immediately captivated by the Starport Blueprint. Starport. Gu Heng initially thought that such a thing would be found in a more advanced technology pool and was surprised to get it within the elite class. Its importance was too high. Currently, the connection between Rage Owl Star and space was very weak, only manageable by various landing transport ships. This resulted in low transport capacity and high transport costs. Generally speaking, those with real demand for bulk interstellar trade cannot do without a starport. As the name suggests, it's an interstellar port, built in a geostationary orbit around a planet, allowing incoming starships to dock easily, ships can be serviced and repaired, cargo can be transferred more conveniently and quickly. The difference a starport makes is like the difference between docking a cargo ship at a port to offload goods by the truckload, as opposed to using small boats or speedboats for transportation. The efficiency gap is huge. The transfer of materials between the starport and the planet's surface mainly relies on 2 methods, orbital tugships and space elevators. Both of these supporting facilities were included in the technological blueprints obtained from the lottery. Orbital tugships require a launch site on the ground and a connection with the space starport in orbit, formulating a corresponding force field tunnel. The tugships themselves have propulsion and can fly up and down within the force field tunnel, quickly carrying heavy loads. On the other hand, the space elevator is another solution, constructing one or multiple physical conduits from the planet's surface to the space starport. The elevator has kinetic energy and moves up and down a physical track. The main difference between these 2 solutions is whether the up and down passage is a physical conduit or a purely energetic force field tunnel. However, these 2 solutions for linking the starport with the planetary surface are not conflicting. It's perfectly feasible to construct a space elevator at the point on the ground that corresponds with the geostationary orbit starport. The initial construction costs might be higher, but the transport costs are lower. The force field tunnel and the tug ships don't necessarily need to be constructed at the corresponding geostationary point. When not in use, it can be turned off, resulting in relatively lower wear and tear. When heavy transportation is needed and the capacity of the space elevator is insufficient, then tug ships can be implemented as they are costlier to operate each time compared to the space elevator. After acquiring a starport, Rage Owl Star would have the qualifications to participate in interstellar trade, unlike previously dealing with the Beautiful Lady, where it could only purchase high-value but small-sized items and use transport ships to slowly ship things. The trade between the Beautiful Lady convoy and Blackbird Heavy Industries even took 3 months. If there had been a starport, such a duration would not be necessary, the job could be completed in 1 or 2 days. This was because the Beautiful Lady came to support Rage Owl Star and persisted through the 3 months of loading and unloading due to some other factors behind the trade with Blackbird Heavy Industries. A typical merchant, upon seeing no starport and relying solely on transport ships for cargo, well, they might as well forget about it. Without a starport, small high-value goods trading could be an option, but forget about bulk goods trading. Only with a starport does one have the ticket to participate in normal interstellar trade. And that's not all. A starport is also the foundation for a series of space technologies. Starship construction is not ideal on a planetary surface. It's not entirely impossible, but very impractical. To elevate a completed starship, akin to a town, from a planetary surface into space, not to mention the energy consumed, the process itself would be a massive destruction to the environment on the ground. Generally, the primary construction work of starships takes place in interstellar shipyards. At most, certain key components might be crafted on the ground and then transported to the interstellar shipyard for assembly. And naturally, the interstellar shipyard would be constructed within a starport. Beyond that, a starport is also a very important link in a planet's orbital defense. Due to the fact that a starport does not need mobility like a starship, which flies around in space, and does not need a propulsion system, it can be equipped with extremely thick armor and formidable firepower. Of course, at that degree, it should no longer be called a starport but a star fortress instead. Additionally, with sufficient anti-orbital firepower on the ground matched with a star fortress, a planet can be far from just a passive target when facing a space fleet. On the contrary, should the enemy dare to approach and their fleet is not powerful enough, the planet's anti-orbital firepower combined with the star fortress's robust combat capability can make any would-be aggressor space fleet experience despair. Looking at it from the aspects of commerce, future star fleet construction, planetary defense, building a starport is the most fundamental of foundations. It is essential. The only problem, Gu Hang realized after careful examination, was that the construction cost of the starport was extremely high. Its black box was the largest among the many technology black boxes he had obtained so far. However, this black box could only produce some of the important components needed for the various starports. Final assembly and the basic construction work still had to be done by conventional manpower. In fact, it was the same for not only the starport but also the Wind Falcon rapid attack vessel and the recently acquired Lion tank. They were similar. The black boxes weren't so big that a touch of a button would produce a gigantic war machine. They would manufacture numerous components according to a program, but assembly was still required. Chapter 343. For the Wind Falcon and the Lion tank, the problem wasn't too big. The components produced by the black box weren't many in number and were quite straightforward to assemble, so they would be quickly dealt with. But building a starport was a different matter. Constructing a starport was akin to building a city in space, orbiting a planet. Even with the help of the black box, that would only significantly reduce the complexity of the construction, but the time saved in the building process wouldn't be that substantial. Moreover, orbital construction also required sufficient construction technology. The individual equipment of workers, construction processes, and knowledge of site selection, all of these posed challenges. Fortunately, in the starport technology blueprint, there were complete solution sets for these things. It all depended on implementation. After looking through this information, Gu Hang pondered for a long time and finally came to a conclusion. Even for building the most rudimentary and lowest grade starport, excluding weapon defenses, energy shields, hardened armor, and starship fabrication capabilities, and maintaining only the trading attributes with the ability to dock ships, such a starport would likely cost upwards of hundreds of millions of tax currency, which equated to 20 years of imperial tax from Rage Owl Star. And to add various functionalities on top of that, the cost would head towards astronomical numbers. Given the current situation on Rage Owl Star, it certainly couldn't be achieved in a short time. But that did not mean that Gu Hang planned to postpone this matter. It was precisely because the cost was so high and the construction period so lengthy that this work needed to be started even earlier. After all, Gu Hang's role as the governor wasn't a one-off deal. If nothing unexpected occurred, he'd be the governor for life, without terms or limitations. Thus, it was imperative to undertake projects of lasting significance. First, he planned to get the corresponding site selection and starport's ground engineering started, then, extend the space elevator, using the orbital end of the space elevator to begin constructing space station platforms, from which to gradually expand and build out the starport. Considering the whole project 3 phases, Gu Hang planned to initiate the first phase. Aside from the starport technology blueprint, the other 3 technologies were not worth discussing. Transition identification system was a prerequisite system required for the construction of starships. The starships of the human empire, to engage in interstellar travel through hyperspace, must utilize the star realm tunnels that connect 2 star systems. These tunnels, filled with spiritual energy and formed through the power of subspace, existed naturally and were opened by the Imperial Psychic Association's Star Guidance Hall. And this identification system was the accompanying technology. It was essential for locating the entrances and exits of the star realm tunnels. At the moment, Gu Hang didn't need this technology. The starport technology had just been drawn, and constructing starships was still out of the picture. However, obtaining it was quite fortunate. It was a necessary technological reserve for building large ships in the future. The chainsaw sword didn't bear mentioning either, just another weapon configuration for interstellar warriors. At most, it could be made lighter and with reduced power, similar to providing an attenuated version of bomb guns to the elite forces of the Special Combat Brigade. Once equipped with exoskeleton armor, they were capable of using the basic version of the chainsaw sword and bomb guns. As for the last one, the Reflector Orbital Air Defense System, as the name implies, it's an active orbital defense system, and of course, the most important component was the reflector laser cannon. It was even a sort of energy weapon that could be installed on starships. The Claw Fierce Tiger was equipped with 10. Besides the reflector laser cannon itself, there was a whole set of air defense systems, including fire control, radar, recognition, and precision interception capabilities among a series of functions. Its primary target was to conduct air defense operations, shooting down planes, fast attack boats, and the like. One shot per target. It could also be used to intercept firepower descending from orbit, such as scalpel missiles and kinetic cannons. If one wanted to wash Revival City or Wuxing City from orbit, then the reflector would be able to intercept them mid-air. Of course, it could also be used as a normal laser cannon if one were to set it up on a flat surface. However, that would be a bit like using a steam hammer to crack nuts. Speaking of anti-aircraft guns being used as flat as a joke, of course, but it also side-heeled to express that the firepower of these ship-mounted guns, even just an S-spec, was powerful enough to breach walls and break the ground. Wu Jiarong stared at the large pile of black boxes lying before her, numbed by their sheer number. In the past, whenever the governor brought out a new black box, she genuinely rejoiced. Although she was far from having the ability to crack these black boxes, by studying them and the high precision, perfectly crafted objects they produced, she always managed to gain some insight and advance her mechanical expertise. This was a critically important gain. Her previously stagnant knowledge had skyrocketed over the course of the year. In the sect of mechanics, she had been recognized only as a technical specialist and, at most, after so many years, had the level of a formal mechanic. But now, she felt she had surpassed the average mechanical priest in the sect of mechanics. Initially, when the governor had recruited that engine prophet named Hu Kei, she had been a bit worried, wondering whether she could be replaced. But soon, she no longer thought that way. The man clearly did not have the governor's trust as much as she did. Moreover, with her current rate of progress, it wouldn't take long to reach the engine prophet's level, which would not be inferior to Hu Kei's. All thanks to the numerous different types and outcomes of the black boxes. Theoretically, the more black boxes the governor brought, the better. But, there were just too many. She simply couldn't keep up with the research. Within the Mechanical Cult Guild, only some top figures had the opportunity to possess a black box and the chance to comprehend it and the perfect creations. Even in the headquarters of the guild, which had a significant number of black boxes, there were more people queuing up to study them. And there I was, Wu Jiarong, spending long durations each morning, struggling to decide which black box to study from the countless options. This was truly bothersome. Nevertheless, she didn't neglect her main tasks. After briefly listening to Gu Hang's introduction and then conducting her own examination and testing, she offered her assessment. The electric grid, 2 types of construction machines, and the agricultural machinery, we can quickly start mass production. However, we'll need to coordinate with the development and production departments to maximize their effectiveness, she said. The chainsword, reflector interception system, and lion tank are a bit more challenging, but we should now have the capability to mass produce them. The hardest part of the lion tank is the anti-gravity engine, but we already have some reserves. As for the Star Harbor technology blueprint, I need more time to fully grasp it. Gu Hang stroked his chin and nodded. We can also use the black box to make a transition identification system first. How many can we produce with the black box? He asked. 1 every 2 months. That few. Gu Hang was somewhat dissatisfied. Ah. Wu Jiarong was baffled. What's there to be dissatisfied about when you can produce 1 a month? This equipment is for starships, and we don't even have the technology to build starships yet. And with the black box, getting 1 virtually for free every 2 months, 6 in a year would make a tidy profit just from exports. Gu Hang seemed to realize he might be asking for too much. Okay, let's go with that. Start production on those that can be started, and as for the Star Harbor technology blueprint, I will assign the development department with the task. Let's start the first phase of the ground construction without delay, he said. Understood. Chapter 344. 3 months had whisked by in a flurry, heralding the end of spring and the impending arrival of summer. In the past, Gu Hang had pondered this issue. The seasonal cycle on Rage Owl Star was almost identical to that of Earth as he remembered it. However, that was the peculiar part. Wasn't this an alien planet? How could things like the length of the day and seasonal changes be so similar? Later, he recalled a very likely answer from his memory. It was the human pioneers of old who had shaped it this way. It was before the Emperor became the Emperor, known as the Golden Age of mankind. In that Golden Age, humans stepped out from their ancestral star, became the masters of the universe with their powerful technology, their profound exploration of spiritual energy, and the assistance of super-intelligent AI. They opened numerous spiritual energy tunnels, traveled at faster than light speeds, and transformed one promising planet after another into environments similar to the human ancestral star using climate modification and orbital change technologies. And then, all of a sudden, at some point, a colossal disaster put an end to everything. The civilization of the Golden Age collapsed in a very short time. The vast, unified, and efficient human federation disintegrated, faster than light travel technologies became ineffective, and each human colony planet instantly turned into an isolated island in the cold and dark universe. Until the Emperor emerged, the human empire was established, and the myriad worlds of humanity were once again united. The Golden Age, that was now an era beyond verification. The research related to it was the most arcane part of historical archaeology. As far as current knowledge was concerned, the collapse of the Golden Age was related to 2 wars against some alien forces. The core reason was the rebellion of artificial intelligence. And now within the human empire, computer technology was strictly taboo, because in this age, all computer electronics were at risk of rebelling. Even in a physically disconnected state, the infiltration of spiritual energy could cause electronic demons to enter, lie dormant, and cause significant damage at critical times. The humans of today would rather develop and use servocranium, an apparently inhumane wetware, to achieve similar effects than dare to use electronic computers. Without electronic computers, there was obviously a considerable negative impact on societal production. Many things in Gu Hang's memory couldn't be reproduced at all. Quite regrettable. He had no intention of challenging the Empire's ban in this area, nor did he desire to witness firsthand just what these electronic demons were all about. At present, the various developments on Rage Owl Star were smooth sailing, and Gu Hang had no interest in seeking any additional thrills. It was a blessing in disguise not to have those monsters knocking on his door. He had no interest in courting trouble. Focusing on farming, steadily advancing, everything was just fine. In this period, the entire alliance did indeed enjoy a rather tranquil existence. That isn't to say there weren't any events within the alliance. On the contrary, the changes within the alliance were significant, and describing them as transformative day by day was not an exaggeration. There was a war raging in the east, and it was almost over. Before departing, Yan Fangxiu had made a bold vow, claiming that pacifying the eastern provinces would take only 3 months. As it turned out, his promise was indeed on the verge of being fulfilled. The East hadn't encountered any monsters, just the routine survivors of the wastelands, who were swiftly swept aside. Now, in the East, the frameworks for 3 new provinces had been erected. Adjacent to Jeoda province was Xianja province, to the south by the sea, bordering Biking Valley, lay Nenwan province, and in the far northeast was Tvu province. The names of these areas were derived from the most famous cities in the region during the era before the collapse. By now, officials from the alliance had moved in and were establishing the ruling structure of the alliance in the 3 eastern provinces. The Central Group Army would continue to be stationed there for some time. On one hand, there were still some matters to settle, on the other, they had to wait for the construction of local defences in the eastern provinces. In short, they weren't in a hurry to return. At the alliance capital, there was still a regular garrison stationed, and several new main force divisions had been formed, so there wasn't any concern about the defense of the core regions. By now, it's fair to say that the eastern provinces had been pacified, with 6 million people brought under the rule of the alliance. At this juncture, the process of unifying the entire planet was more than halfway complete. The western desert and the northlands remain, and the last 3 places to the west of the continent. Judging by the population, the approximate 40 million people on the planet, over 20 million were now under the rule of the alliance. Changes were abundant even in the core region of the alliance. Wuxing City continued to absorb a steady stream of population and launched several new industries, especially the military-industrial production of the Lion tank. Within all the mechanized composite brigades, there were tank companies allocated to the 5 major combat battalions. And now, these tank companies could finally live up to their name. Each company comprised of 3 lions, truly formidable in siege warfare. When necessary, the combined force of 18 lions formed an even more terrifying armored horde. Don't consider the Lion tank as just an ordinary little tank. A Lion tank crew consisted of 9 people, necessitating coordination to effectively operate the tank. Labeled a light tank, it was nevertheless twice the size of a Challenger tank. When it moved, it resembled a steel fortress shifting across the field. Chapter 345. It is said that the upgraded version, the True Star Realm main battle tank Lion King tank, requires a crew of 21, much larger than the Lion tank, and its firepower, even more exaggerated. Although the Lion tank is fierce, its production is also very difficult. Black Box can only produce 4 per month, the tank factories that have been built can only turn out 4 per month as well. It takes 2 months to replenish the tanks needed for a composite brigade. Infrastructure construction is being heavily promoted in the 3 central provinces, and with the help of superconductive power grids, basic construction machinery, and construction engineering machinery, the overall speed of construction has soared dramatically. The spring plowing in Biking Valley province has almost finished, and according to Jason Morgan's report, it looks very successful so far. The new agricultural machinery has been of great help. It is estimated that by the end of the year, not only will the projected production plans be met, but there may also be a substantial surplus. Although there have been so many changes, these are all driven by Gu Heng and the alliance government. These changes are within the expected scope, they are what he wanted to see, and there aren't any particular surprises. Moreover, the monthly grace point income from various places is also gradually improving with the implementation of the production plan. The income for the recent month has already reached 2,104 points. And for the recent 3 months, the income totaled up to 5,988 points. This number even made him feel a bit surreal. Back when he was very poor, the monthly grace points would only be a few dozen or 100, and he mostly relied on making money through wars. Now, just the fixed monthly income is already so high. The over 18,000 grace points he had before were reduced to just over 500 after setting up a bunch of things in a 1,000 tier technology prize pool with a 10 draw. But now, altogether, he once again has over 6,000. Gu Heng spent 3,000 to find 10 new Star Realm warriors and added over 500 elite soldiers to the Special Warfare Brigade. He considered the remaining grace points and decided to bring 2 previously unlocked new buildings into being. National Church and Court of Justice. These 2 buildings appeared as new items in his construction list after the incident involving the Great Impure One, Ge Wajia ended. However, Gu Heng didn't prioritize them too highly. The 18,000 grace points he had previously planned to use didn't allocate anything for these 2 items. Now, with grace points in hand again, he could consider them. Mainly because it wasn't a good option to draw more technology cards. On one hand, the 1,000-point tier technology cards were heavily drawn last time, and having Air Force was considered a fairly decent outcome. Drawing more now would not be cost-effective, as a few empty draws would be too damaging. On the other hand, even without the Air Force, if he did draw them, the Alliance currently lacked the ability to assimilate more high-level technology. Since grace points wouldn't grow by keeping them, Gu Hang simply spent them to see how much these two new buildings could help. National Church. When you have built a church with the imperial state religion as its faith and put it into operation, you can exchange this option to designate a particular church. It increases the determination of the faith within the coverage area of the church, reduces various types of corruption, and slightly increases the probability of finding activatable religious talents. It can train a new troop type, military priest. Exchange value, 1,500 grace. Court of Justice. When you have established an organization dedicated to eradicating evil with the faith of the imperial state religion, you can designate its headquarters building as the Court of Justice. It improves the efficiency of all law enforcers affiliated with the Court of Justice in eradicating designated types of evil targets. It can train a new troop type, Demon Hunter. Exchange price, 1,500 grace. After constructing the Court of Justice, you must select a specific target for eradication. There are 3 options: demons, aliens, heretics. The construction of the church is a bit of a loss for Gu Hang. It may be because of the social awareness he had before the transmigration, he never thought religion was that important. But in reality, he might have been overlooking this aspect all along. As a planet that had experienced apocalypse once before, religion's presence on Rage Owl Star is not particularly strong. But, generally speaking, almost everyone has heard of the imperial state religion, remembers some of its doctrines, and even certain customs have developed from religious traditions left over from the past. When Rage Owl Star people encounter certain things, they like to exclaim Divine Emperor above to express surprise, anger, or joy, just as people in Gu Hang's previous life would say oh my god. However, regarding whether he should strengthen the construction of religion, Gu Hang still has his reservations. As for the new troop type of military priest, he glanced over those and didn't pay much attention to them either. The price, grade, just like a regiment political commissar, and even their functions overlapped greatly in many areas. One emphasized loyalty, the other faith, both in spirited morale and enforced discipline, just with different methods and forms. So there was no significant need for them. Among the many specific effects of the church, the only one he relatively valued was the reduction of corruption. Moreover, since the construction of the Court of Justice behind it required a church as a prerequisite, he built one somewhat reluctantly. The selected location was Wuxing City. In truth, if there was any place that needed it, it would certainly be Biking Valley Province. Although the problems in the Green Valley region had been resolved, building an edifice to suppress corruption still seemed more reliable if one wasn't at ease. But the coverage area of a church was limited, and Biking Valley region was vast with a sparse population. After establishing many farms, the population became particularly dispersed, reducing the value of building large churches significantly. In contrast, Wuxing City was bound to become the core, most populous city of the entire alliance. In fact, Wuxing City's population had recently continued to absorb people, reaching a scale of 2 million. With more people, the difficulty of management was bound to increase. Gu Hang did not wish for Wuxing City of the future to resemble the lower strata of some nest capital worlds he remembered, where heresy and cults proliferated everywhere. Building a church to suppress corruption was meaningful after all. Then there was the Court of Justice, which was quite interesting. Currently, the Alliance did indeed lack a spy agency. And establishing a Court of Justice was a good opportunity. Among the 3 categories to choose from, demons need not be mentioned further, and aliens were mainly meant to combat non-human interstellar species. But Gu Hang would not have much use for that. It was the heresy option that was the most interesting. Heresy referred to human traitors. Essentially, these were people who did not believe in the Lord of humanity, but the term could be broadened. Those who believed in the Emperor, yet believed in an incorrect manner, could also be labeled as heretics. So since it dealt with human enemies, it became quite interesting. If one day, Gu Hang had to go to war with Blackbird Heavy Industries, situated on the other side of the planet in the westernmost part of the continent, what did he need? Aside from full-scale hard power in military and economics, political aspects could not be neglected. Blackbird was not a local power, and they had the support of the Fatches family behind them. If Gu Hang made his move, he had to consider this influence. If there were judges able to gather some evidence that could determine Blackbird Heavy Industries as heretical, wouldn't that make it justifiable? This was called creating a pretext. On the other hand, Gu Hang's understanding of the far west of the continent was limited. He indeed needed a team to go there and see what the situation was really like. So, he first instructed the Alliance's Chief Justice, Lambert Hodgson, to establish an organization for the Court of Justice and recruited 2 teams. Next, he added the building's function, selecting it as the Heresy Court of Justice. Subsequently, the 2 teams that had been recruited were all trained as heretic demon hunters. One team was dispatched to the west, carrying out the task of investigating the heresy situation in the western desert and the western regions of the continent, which in effect was intelligence gathering. The other team operated secretly within the various domains of the Alliance's homeland, with the task of investigating the internal heresy situation of the Alliance, essentially undertaking anti-corruption work. Within the Alliance system, corruption equated to heresy, no question about it. Chapter 346. After chatting with Lambert Hodgson about the recruitment and preparation of training for the heretic demon hunters, Gu Hang received a special gift. It was brought by a spaceship. The claw-fierce tiger intercepted the spacecraft briefly before reporting the information to Gu Hang. Upon learning the spacecraft came from the Gu family, Gu Hang thought for a moment and allowed the visitor to come in. It was a small spacecraft which barely met the standards for interstellar travel. After allowing them in, it wasn't long before he met the person. It was an acquaintance. The visitor, named Zhang Xishan, was a servant of the Gu family. He had been serving the Gu family, or rather, his sickly mother, since that big Gu Hang could remember. In Gu Hang's mind, Zhang Xishan had no particular talents and struggled to handle certain matters independently, but he did have one redeeming quality: he was honest, reliable, and loyal. It's worth mentioning that the only attendant who had come with Gu Hang to Rage Owl Star was Zhang Xishan's son. Now, the 2 of them were reunited. However, before visiting his son, Zhang Xishan took care of the formalities. In front of Gu Hang, he respectfully said, "Hang, along with me on this ship are another 100 people. The Lady Mother worries that you are in a desolate place with no one to use, so she sent us to help you out. They are all new recruits of the family, top graduates from the various higher education institutions on Capital Wing Star, and have all signed long-term work contracts with the family. I've brought the contracts with me. In short, whatever you need us to do, just arrange it." In Zhang Xishan's presence, Gu Hang didn't say much. But what he was actually thinking was, "Now you're worried about me not having people to use? Where were you earlier?" He didn't lack people to use now. Even if he truly needed help, he wouldn't want to use a bunch of people from the Gu family about whom he knew nothing. He feared that the Rage Owl Star Alliance's various pieces of intelligence would mysteriously get leaked to the heavens if he were to use them. Of course, Gu Hang wasn't so afraid that he felt the need to be overly cautious. He merely considered briefly and decided to assign this group brought by Zhang Xishan to Ozania. Ozania had been extremely busy lately and genuinely needed more educated people to help. However, it wasn't possible for them to be involved in the important core work. Send them off to the countryside. Zhang Xishan also maintained a cautious attitude and didn't say a word to these people. He had brought them here, and it was up to Hang to use them however he wanted. He could even send them all to the mines to labor. After handing over this group, Zhang Xishan brought up a second matter. He called people to carry out several large boxes from the spacecraft. "This is a star speech communication tower. Our people will assemble it," Zhang Xishan said. "With the help of a star speaker, it can tune to specific frequencies and communicate with other star language towers. The Lady Mother says that you are like an isolated island here, completely cut off from the outside world. This device is meant to help you." In contrast to the 100 young men and women, the star language tower was a pure delight to Gu Hang. To communicate at an interstellar level, conventional means won't suffice. Rage Owl Star was physically many light years away from the Tianma Capital Wing Star. Normal communication would be impossible. Only by sending star speech messages, through the Star Realm Tunnel, interstellar communication becomes feasible. However, this device was also an unequivocal high-tech product. At least Gu Hang had not been able to get his hands on one until now. With it, Gu Hang wouldn't have to go through the Imperial Navy in the heavens for every message he wanted to send. That would only compromise his secrets. As for needing a star speaker to operate the star speech communication, that was not a major issue. The term star speaker refers to psychic users with special skills in a particular profession, rather than requiring any special abilities. In theory, if Gu Hang didn't have a suitable star speaker among his people, he could learn the relevant technology and operate it himself. For someone of his level 5 psychic abilities, it shouldn't be too difficult. However, even for this, he didn't need to act personally, his sickly mother had already thought of it. The ship came with a star speaker. What more could Gu Hang say? He understood the meaning behind it. Establishing interstellar communication capabilities was certainly the official reason. But, when a mother gives her son a mobile phone with a SIM card, what could that mean? Gu Hang understood. At first, he was somewhat conflicted, but then he figured it out, there was no need to worry about being recognized or anything. First, his younger cousin hadn't recognized him, next, since the family relations were not too good and it seemed like Gu Hang had run away from home to experience the world, his temperament had undergone a great change, so what was there not to understand? Accept it if you want to, otherwise, forget it. Why make the call? The Gu family was the largest commercial organization in the Tianma star sector, even extending its influence to several external star sectors. He was also a direct descendant of the family. Not to take advantage of this relationship would indeed be a waste. He had no psychological repugnance to completely severing ties with the predecessor's family, keeping no interactions at all. Keep it normal. Construction of the star language tower was quick, and the tower itself was not very large, just a 4-meter-high metal latticework tower. The most important part was actually the complex psychic device located underneath. Chapter 347. This thing, Gu Hang simply placed it on the rooftop terrace of the governor's building that had been remodeled from the old Alliance Council building. After connecting a communication line, his office could now directly conduct interstellar communications. The star speaker had a lounge in the building, and when Gu Hang needed him, he would go to the rooftop to work. This first interstellar phone call, he really made to his mother. About a minute later, the communication was connected. However, contrary to his expectation that his old lady would appear in their family estate on Flying Wing Star, Miss Wang Qi was currently dressed in formal attire, apparently on a starship. "Mother," Gu Hang called out. He thought that calling a stranger mother would be difficult for him. But the word came out smoothly. Possibly, the lingering influence of his predecessor was still there. Dressed in an outfit akin to a dark blue military uniform, yet different, with her long hair coiled up at the back into a bun, Miss Wang Qi looked stern, just as Gu Hang remembered her to be. She said, "Xiao Hang, what's the matter?" Gu Hang resisted the urge to roll his eyes and said indifferently, "Nothing much, just wanted to say thanks. Uncle Shishan and his people have all arrived, and the Star Speech Communication Tower has been erected. Just wanted to let you know." "All right, I got it." "Okay." The two then fell into an awkward silence. Gu Hang's thoughts inadvertently drifted away. According to the memories of his predecessor, after he grew up, his interactions with his mother seemed to always be like this. Either they had nothing to say to each other, or they were arguing. Gathering his thoughts, Gu Hang chuckled lightly. Miss Wang Qi on the other end, seeing her son's relieved, calm, and carefree smile, was somewhat stunned. She hadn't seen her son smile in front of her for a long time. It felt as if her heart had been struck by some kind of specialized weapon. But she quickly gathered her composure. However, Gu Hang started a new topic. "Where are you now?" "On my way to Heijian Star." "To Heijian Star?" Gu Hang frowned, quickly recalling something. "The family meeting that happens every 6 years is due again, isn't it?" "Yes," Wang Qi nodded, then added as if remembering something, "I decided not to invite you." "Don't mind it, you're not suitable to participate right now." "I know." Gu Hang nodded, then asked, "Will Uncle Ming continue to be elected this time?" The Uncle Ming he referred to was his father's cousin, the current Gu clan head. Hearing this question, Wang Qi showed a strange smile, looking somewhat disdainful, somewhat nervous, but in the end, it turned into indifference. "You'll know in a few months." Gu Hang was not as naive as his predecessor, and he keenly sensed something. "Mother? Are you planning something?" "You don't need to know, we'll talk about it when the time comes." At this point, Wang Qi once again showed her typical assertiveness towards her son. But Gu Hang would not back down, nor would he indulge his old mother. "I need to tell you," Gu Hang said, "if you are planning to take any action, please make sure to inform me. No matter the actual situation, in the eyes of the outside world, especially within the family, we are one and the same." Wang Qi laughed scornfully out of habit, but before she could speak, Gu Hang interrupted her. She only saw her son on the screen slowly stand up, speaking to her with a serious and earnest expression. "Everything on Rage Owl Star is steadily improving, The potential here is infinite, and in my view, it's worth more than the entire Gu clan. I do not wish for changes within the Gu clan to interfere with my development plans for Rage Owl Star. What are you talking about? Your pathetic planet with an annual tax of only 5 million tax currency, compared to the entire Gu clan? Gu Hang, have you become so deluded by a little success that you have forgotten your own surname? Gu commercial firm, with its 14 major convoys, one single convoy is worth far more than your planet could ever be. Gu Hang didn't want to steer the conversation into an argument. He calmed down and took a different approach. Perhaps you're not aware, but I project that this year my planet will generate 34 million tax currency. Subtracting taxes, local consumption, and other expenses, my planet can still earn at least 10 million tax currency. By next year, I'm confident I can double that number. Do you grasp the concept, Mother? That would match the income of a family convoy. And how much does it cost to establish a family convoy? The beautiful Lady Convoy with its 5 armed commercial ships costs at least 1 billion tax currency to build, while their annual profit is at most 20 to 30 million tax currency. Does a convoy have room to grow? My planet does. With population growth, the restoration of productivity, and the resumption of interstellar trade, the profits from here will only increase substantially. Why does the Fascist family scorn the Star Sector authorities and ignore the naval families in the Tianma Star Sector? Because they own 3 well-developed planets, they are the biggest sponsors of the Star Realm armed forces there, that's their confidence. And I could possibly make Rage Owl Star a place that rivals the 3 planets owned by the Fascists. Do you want to stand in my way? Miss Wang Qi fell silent. After a while, she said, My son, of course I wouldn't obstruct your path. On the contrary, if I succeed in what I'm planning, your journey will be all the more smooth. And if you fail? I won't fail. Gu Hang laughed. Is there really such a thing in this world as a plan that cannot fail? Not even the Divine Emperor can claim that. Mind your words. Just the truth, Gu Hang replied. So, can you now tell me what you're actually planning to do? Miss Wang Qi hesitated for a moment, but ultimately her son's performance made her sigh. It was time to stop treating him like a child. It's time you knew. Then, she outlined her idea. It didn't involve specific strategies or implementation plans, just a concept. Miss Wang Qi wanted to vie for the position of Gu clan head. And it wasn't a position Miss Wang Qi could sit in herself. If she succeeded, Gu Hang would be the one to take that seat. She had been planning for many years, vowing to personally reclaim everything her husband had lost. And without a doubt, the lost possession referred to the position of family head, which should have fallen into her husband's hands, but due to an accident, became owned by Gu Ming. Although the Gu family had an air of a federation with the family head's words not being absolutely final, especially in recent years, after Gu Hang's grandfather's death and power being taken by his cousin Gu Ming, this decentralized situation had worsened. Gu Ming's prestige within the clan was far from as profound as the old family heads. However, after taking over the business, Miss Wang Qi, with her exceptional skills, came to directly control 4 of the 14 great Gu convoys. 4 more were her allies, more than half. The remaining 6 convoys were also under her certain influence. The family convention, held every 6 years to elect a new family head, was approaching. With such a situation at hand, she, of course, had all the rights to strive for the position of family head. Her original plan was for Gu Hang to become the family head. But the Gu Hang of the past, in her opinion, was worthless, and she had intended to oversee everything herself, like an empress dowager, for a few years. She planned to hand over all the business to Gu Hang once he matured. Of course, if Gu Hang failed to mature, it wouldn't matter. She would have Gu Hang sire many children, train a new successor among his sons, and find a true heir later. However, Gu Hang's taking up the position of planetary governor before getting married and having children had caused a significant disruption to her plan. Her allies began to doubt whether the plan would succeed. In this sense, Gu Hang's predecessor needn't have worried too much about his safety. His mother wouldn't let him die, after all. But Miss Wang Qi's intention was to use her funds to fill the gap for the first round of imperial tax and then find a way to move Gu Hang away from the position of planetary governor, getting her plan back on track. Unexpectedly, Gu Hang had settled into his role as planetary governor over the year, and it looked like paying the imperial tax wouldn't be an issue anymore. Moreover, Rage Owl Star seemed to be prospering more and more. This was an unexpected and pleasant surprise. Chapter 348 Gu Hang's arrival at Rage Owl Star indeed put her mother in a passive position. She was supposed to vie for the position of family head, but the designated family head was gone, which could still work out. However, his performance on Rage Owl Star brought about a twist in the situation. Gu Hang's outstanding performance at Rage Owl Star not only saved Wang Qi millions needed to fill the imperial tax pit, but more importantly, it enabled Gu Hang to establish his own industry. Did the Gu family not want to own their own planet? Certainly, they did. But acquiring a planet of their own, especially one with positive assets, was extremely difficult. Yet, worlds like Rage Owl Star, which were wastelands, they didn't want. The initial investment required for development was too high, the period for recouping costs was quite lengthy, and there were numerous risks involved. For example, during the past year and a half, Gu Hang had already encountered disasters like the Greenskins and the invasion of the demon cult. Any of these risk factors could be catastrophic to anyone normally tasked with redeveloping Rage Owl Star, turning a high investment into a total loss. Moreover, the biggest problem with seeking an unreliable planetary governor position is that you can't just cut your losses and walk away. If other investments fail, you just accept the loss, but if investing in a planet fails, the Imperial Taxation Department won't cut you any slack. You have to pay the full imperial tax owed, without missing a dime, and keep paying in the future. It's precisely because of this that Gu Hang's performance over the past year has been surprising. Although due to Rage Owl Star's isolation and the slow flow of information, not many people were aware of it, and the upper echelons of Flying Wing Stars society still considered Gu Hang's appointment as planetary governor to be a joke. However, in the eyes of some who were paying close attention, the reality was crystal clear. The people of the Gu family, of course, belonged to this attentive group. Because of Gu Hang's absurd actions, Wang Qi allies began to question her plan with increasing intensity. Some of the most serious doubts were bordering on slipping out of Wang Qi control. Even with some remedial measures taken by Wang Qi, they worried if elevating such a family head could indeed increase their interests. But Gu Hang's performance alleviated many of their concerns, anger, and indecision. What they once believed to be a good-for-nothing, a prodigal son dragging his mother down, had transformed into a planetary governor. And, in fact, without any support from his family, he had managed to run his enterprise successfully on that wasteland world. Not only was he no longer in need of external subsidies, but he was also able to pay the taxes on his own and achieve a rather impressive output. At this moment, by next year this output might already match one of the family's merchant fleets on a planet, so who would dare to look down on him? Industry and commerce, these are two different matters. Moreover, this is only the current comparison, the potential of a planet, with future development improving, a growing population, and a more complete industrial structure, everything still has great potential for enhancement. And could this potential be realized? At least judging by Gu Hang's performance over the past year and a half, it was quite likely. To be honest, many found it hard to believe it was true, even suspecting that these were rumors fabricated by Wang Qi to maintain support from her old allies. How else could it be? How could Rage Owl Star, which had troubled Pei Desi's leadership for a long time and been a burden on the Star Sector government for many years, be so easily managed? Turned from wasteland to treasure in just a year and a half? Could it be that the guy who used to have the reputation of a wastrel was actually a chosen of the Emperor, blessed by the Divine Emperor? However, as more and more information was disclosed, even the doubters had to believe. For this reason, before Wang Qi could even launch some of her additional arrangements, her circumstances began to improve. She probably wouldn't need to take special risks anymore, just slowly proceed with the original plan. She was not even afraid of the current family head learning about her intentions. This matter couldn't be hidden anyway, and it was all above board. Everyone could just proceed with their strategic moves, and the winner would be decided at the next family assembly when the votes of the 14 family merchant fleets were cast. However, an unexpected event happened. The current family head, Gu Ming, convened the Gu clan's family assembly ahead of schedule. The meeting was to be held on Heijian Star. Among the 9 major planets of the Tianma Star sector, aside from Rage Owl Star, the most lackluster was Heijian Star. It was a feudal world, where the overall technological level apart from a few privileged nobles enjoying some interstellar technological conveniences was not much better than the Middle Ages in most places on the planet. It wasn't that there was no technology, but the entire social production relationship was just off. Serfs operating advanced agricultural machinery contributed to their lord knights. The lord knights, vassals to various lieges, piloted knight mechas to fight for their lieges. The lieges, in turn, were vassals to kings, assisting the kings with tax collection. The highest ruling body of the planet was the King's Alliance. The planetary governor was traditionally taken on in rotation by the largest kings of the world, responsible for ensuring that each kingdom was able to pay their taxes in full. Should there be any shortfall, the King's Alliance would launch punitive wars against the deficient country, making up for the taxes through plunder. Gu Heng was quite speechless about such a backward place, but this was the overall policy of the empire: as long as you pay taxes, I don't care about the rest. Chapter 349. As long as the taxes are paid and there are no other major issues, the empire truly doesn't care about the development of the planets. Gu Heng even suspects that after the empire reconquers some worlds, it seems to intentionally maintain their original states. I really don't know what the supreme lords of the empire are thinking, but that's the status quo. Hagian Star has a population of 400 million. Feudal production relations really cannot support too many people, not to mention that their industrial capacity is virtually non-existent. However, the relationship between this planet and the Gu family is very good. Those kings, when they want to confer more lords and more knights, need a tangible standard: mecha knight armors. Obviously, with Hagian Star's current state, they can't even manufacture agricultural machinery properly, let alone mecha. The mecha used by those conferred knights obviously rely on foreign trade. So, it is quite normal that they have a good relationship with the Gu clan. The last 6 family councils of the Gu clan were all held on Hagian Star. This time is no exception. Wang Qi believes that Gu Ming is doing this now because he wants to act while the achievements that Gu Heng has made and the reputation he has built are not yet significant enough. And when Rage Owl Star pays its first tax in 7 months, definitively proving its capacity, it will be too difficult to reverse the situation. He wants to initiate the family council before then to set the agenda for the next 6 years while the mess stirred up by Gu Heng has not completely settled down, at a time when Wang Qi allies are severely shaken, and before Wang Qi has had a chance to gather more votes. It is certainly a clever strategy, but Wang Qi also says she is not worried. She currently controls at least 8 votes, Gu Ming can't overturn the situation. If all goes as expected, you will be the Gu clan head in 4 months, Wang Qi told Gu Heng. Gu Heng smiled. He has always felt that the current business structure of the Gu family is very unstable, purely a merchant convoy, with all their assets on those fleets it's too intangible. Although the present value of Rage Owl Star is not enough, it might at best be equivalent to a merchant convoy by next year, and the Gu clan has 14 convoys. But he would not trade his foundational enterprise for the position of Gu clan head. With further development, an actual planet, countless populations, a massive army, tangible industrial and agricultural output, wouldn't that be more solid than being a traveling merchant? Of course, becoming the family head wouldn't prevent him from continuing his role as the planetary governor of Rage Owl Star. If it really could be like this, it wouldn't be bad at all. The Gu family lacks nothing else, they truly have a lot of money. Even star sector leaders seek to curry favor with them, which speaks volumes. If he could indeed mobilize the entire clan's power, then the future development of Rage Owl Star would skyrocket. Even if, by that time, the actual person in charge of the Gu family is not him but his mother, it wouldn't be a big problem. However, when people plan things, they can't just look on the bright side. Are you so confident? He asked. Yes, Wang Qi displayed her confidence. But what if Mr. Ming flips the table? Hey! Wang Qi was stunned. Flips the table? What do you mean? Gu Heng put it more bluntly, is the security for the family council arranged by you? No, Wang Qi said, do you think he would commit murder at that time? Why wouldn't he? Impossible, nothing like this has ever happened in our family. Wang Qi's first reaction was to object. The Gu clan's family tradition has been maintained for so many years, we have never had internal bloodshed. We have always been united. She hadn't finished speaking when Gu Heng interrupted her. Everything has a first time, convention is made to be broken. Are you saying we shouldn't consider extreme situations? Wang Qi was silent for a moment. I actually have considered that he might be desperate. I have brought enough guards. Moreover, the current planetary governor of Hagian Star, King Miaoer, has a good relationship with me and is a supporter. Don't place your safety in someone else's hands. Can you be sure about King Miaoer? Even if he is reliable, did he personally arrange security for the venue? Wang Qi was stumped by these questions again. Gu Heng paused, then continued, and as for the guards by your side, I probably know who they are. Are they the ones who used to catch me and lock me up when I did something reckless? Not that I'm looking down on them, but, they're just not up to it. Do you have a better candidate? Of course, I do. To tell you the truth, their level is just the average level of the soldiers under my command. I can find a team far larger than your personal guard anytime, and more skilled than they are. Little Hang, you've really come into your own. Wang Qi didn't know whether to believe him or not, so it was hard to tell whether her remark was sarcastic or admiring. Perhaps it was both. Gu Hang didn't dwell on it, continuing, besides, what you need is not just a guard squad, but an army. After disconnecting the communication, Miss Wang Qi sat there, lost in thought for a long while. Until the door of the office on the starship was knocked on. Come in. Aunt. The visitor was Wang Jiarong. After the beautiful lady convoy returned, all the ships needed to undergo repairs before setting out again. So, she returned to her aunt's side to help out as a secretary, something she used to do before being released in the past year or two to lead a trading convoy completely under Wang Qi control. She asked cautiously, "Your call with cousin, it's over?" "Yes." "That's good, you and cousin haven't had such a lengthy chat in a long time." "It was all business." "What exactly about?" Wang Jiarong asked, appearing very curious. Wang Qi revealed a smile, "Your cousin, he's worried about your aunt being swindled." Wang Jiarong felt a surge of happiness, thinking the conversation went well. Of course he'd be worried, after all, you're his mother. At this, Wang Qi sighed, he's changed so much. Even though his voice and appearance are the same, his demeanor is completely different. Isn't that a good thing? Cousin getting better is what you've always wanted, isn't it, aunt? Indeed, it is wonderful. Wang Qi said with a smile, however, we need to change our route. We will head to the Rage Owl star system first. To do what? To bring back an army. Providing an army to his mother to escort her to Hajian Star and to ensure her safety there had practical significance. Apart from the fact that she was the mother of his current body, Gu Hang had at least two other significant reasons. For the position of the family head of the Gu clan to fall into his hands was of great importance. The leader of the wealthiest merchant family in the Tianma star sector, commanding a fleet of 14 starships capable of interstellar travel, ranging from armed merchant ships to transport vessels, represented a tremendous wealth. Even though this wealth wouldn't belong to him all at once, nor even to his power-wielding mother, since those trading convoys were all franchisees, the ability to mobilize this force in name, the power of this wealth, was already substantial enough. This was of immense significance for the development of Rage Owl Star, serving as a major thrust for its entry into the interstellar community. And the second reason, which was actually realized based on the first, was that he needed a stage to showcase his strength. Keeping a low profile and making a name for oneself were not entirely conflicting actions. Gu Hang had certain things in his possession that required discretion, needing him to quietly amass wealth. But the information about Rage Owl Star's growing strength, prosperity, and sufficient potential, that information should be widely disseminated. The more people knew, the better. It would draw attention. And attention meant money, which was the source of development's momentum. In short, whether from a personal emotional standpoint or from practical interests, this mother, she was still needed. One simply couldn't do without a mother. Chapter 350. After discussing with his mother, Gu Hang decided that he could dispatch a force of about 30,000 people to accompany the mission to Hajian Star. The reason for this number was mainly due to consideration of loading capacity and delivery ability. They would stay inside the starships in the capacity of sailors and crew members. It was not that they couldn't carry more people. In fact, Denison Henry's fleet that was conducting the operation consisted of 9 starships, among which 4 were big belly transports. This thing was quite famous in interstellar trade. It wasn't fast, it had no heavy armor, and it didn't even have designed ports for weapons, lacking the potential to be modified into an armed merchant ship. But it had 2 advantages that made it dominant in interstellar trade. 1. It was big and could carry a lot. 2. It was cheap. A big belly could carry a population limit of up to 20 million people, though that would mean a very poor quality of life, treating people like cargo, but it could indeed carry that many. However, aside from loading capacity, delivery ability also needed to be taken into account. If Gu Hang really gave Denison Henry a force of 100,000, with the delivery ability of this merchant fleet, it would take a long time to get the people to the ground. 30,000 was the limit. The troop Gu Hang selected included the 34th Motorized Division and the 37th and 38th Mechanized Brigades. 3 division and brigade level units, totaling more than 28,000 people. Gu Hang also dispatched a few hundred of the 10th Brigade's Special Forces elites, along with some civilian military officers, amassing a total of 30,000. Gu Hang hoped they wouldn't be needed, that they were just there to stage an armed march, and, at best, to hold a small parade at Heijian Star to display the demeanor of Rage Owl Star. If it came to a point where they were needed, things could become very troublesome, and the worst-case scenario Gu Hang anticipated might occur. He really didn't want to witness that scene, but he was indeed preparing for it. The fleet led by Wang Qi had just departed from Flying Wing Star. Generally speaking, the quickest route from Flying Wing Star to Heijian Star would be through 2-star realm tunnels, first traveling from Flying Wing Star to the Karolia 3-star system, then on to the Heijian Star system. However, since Wang Qi had decided to visit Rage Owl Star first, she could travel from Karolia 3 to Rage Owl Star, and then use the Star Realm Tunnel to Heijian Star. Within the Rage Owl Star system, there were a total of 3 Star Realm Tunnels, 2 of them led to Karolia 3 and Heijian Star, respectively, and the third exited the Tianma Star sector, heading to Orange Chrysanthemum Star in the neighboring Amber Star sector. Based on calculations, it would take her fleet about half a month to reach Rage Owl Star. In that case, no special preparations needed to be made, just ensuring that the troops were fully equipped would suffice. During this half-month, several things happened. Matters among our own people. Just as Gu Hang had decided which troops would be sent to Heijian Star to serve as guards for his mother, a senior official from the alliance came to seek an audience. He sat in his office chair, listening expressionlessly as Dennison Henry rambled on with his complaints. Speaking of him, he had also joined Gu Hang's power early on. Initially just a merchant from Rubbish Town, he had not even managed to secure the position of Rubbish Town's representative, but he had invested in Gu Hang early on and provided some help. This investment brought him enormous returns. Now, he had become the governor of Alliance High Tower Province, fulfilling his initial investment. Back then, his goal was to have the governor support him in becoming the head of Rubbish Town. Today, not only is Rubbish Town under his control, but the broader region surrounding Rubbish Town and Jeoda Ruins had been incorporated into Jeoda Province, all under his jurisdiction. Previously, Jeoda Province had been the smallest of the central 3 provinces, both in terms of population and area. Recently, when Yan Fangxiu led the Central Group Army to pacify the eastern provinces, a large amount of border territory and settlements were planned into Jeoda Province's jurisdiction. This expansion increased the area of Jeoda Province by more than threefold. Its population grew from the original 300,000 to 1.4 million, almost 4 to 5 times the original. Not only that, the exploitation of low-energy storms inside Jeoda Ruins was also leading across the entire alliance. Solely from that industry, the output of compressed energy crystal blocks was sufficient. With this contribution, coupled with being one of the founders of the alliance, Dennison Henry could easily rely on old relationships and the close proximity to the energy source, and since Jeoda Province was near to Wuxing City, it was easier for him to acquire those relocated industrial lines. In principle, Dennison Henry should have been satisfied. His job was only to manage his province well. But he wasn't. He was still after one thing. He hoped that the ground portion of the starport to be built on Rage Owl Star could be located within his jurisdiction. Chapter 351. Speaking of this matter, the relevant technological blueprints had already been given to Wu Jiarong to arrange. After on-site inspections, she found several places suitable for the construction of a starport. There were several alternative locations, generally concentrated to the east of Revival City, at the border of Jeoda Province and Xianja Province. Naturally, a strife, both overt and covert, began between the two sides. Obviously, if one could ensure that the surface component of the starport was built within their own jurisdiction, the completion of the starport in the future would bring tremendous economic benefits and would have an obvious, significant uplifting effect on the development of their own province. Initially, Henry had been confident that he would secure the construction rights. But the final result left him extremely disappointed. The ultimate site chosen was a place in Xianja Province called Skaro Highlands. Henry was outraged by this. He made more than one disturbance at the alliance government and had several intense confrontations with Ozania, accusing the alliance development department of cronyism and excluding him. The new provincial governor of Xianja Province was a former official from the development department. They were looking after their own, disregarding several investigative reports issued by the Alliance Research Institute. He insisted that the alternative locations for the starport in Jayota province were more suitable than Skaro Highlands. In his direct words to Ozania, "Playing favors, are we? Fond of playing favors, are we? Isn't my network stronger and more solid than anyone else's? Even you came from the first batch of refugees I brought to the governor from Revival City. I was also the governor's first investor. That Raphael guy, what is he? Even deserving to compete with me?" Why did Gu Heng know this so clearly? Because it was the Ministry of Internal Affairs that had passed the information on to him. Ozania found it somewhat difficult to handle Henry's assertiveness. In practice, she indeed rejected Henry's requests many times, even face to face. Still, when being berated, it was not easy for her to stand firm and have the guards throw Henry out. After all, he was a high official of a province in the alliance, an elder statesman, and what he said about Ozania being brought to the governor by him was indeed the truth. Making it too ugly in public was indeed not good. To give him a good talking to was one thing, to firmly refuse unreasonable requests was another. But Henry was clearly not satisfied with this. Seeing that Ozania, the alliance premier, was unwilling to satisfy his demands, he angrily left a few ugly words behind. "Ungrateful, your role as premier is utterly useless," and then he came to see Gu Heng. Of course, in front of Gu Heng, he couldn't possibly behave as arrogantly. On the contrary, his demeanor was very humble. He prostrated himself as soon as he entered and began to tearfully recount his grievances, not rising until Gu Heng repeatedly and impatiently told him to get up. Only then did he consent to rise and sit on a chair brought by an attendant, continuing his complaints. Gu Heng grew increasingly annoyed the more he listened. Finally, unable to endure it any longer, he lifted a document in his hand and hurled it at Denison Henry's face. "Take a good look at this for yourself." Gu Heng stared at him. "Are you going to continue your talk in front of me?" The crying and complaining abruptly stopped. Henry had not anticipated that Gu Heng would erupt in such anger, and was momentarily stunned. He glanced at the white paper that had flown into the air before landing. He was quite familiar with its content, having seen it many times before. It stated that the site selection for Jayota province was indeed slightly superior environmentally to the Skaro Highlands. And that had been precisely his excuse for causing trouble on numerous occasions. Gu Heng looked at him, seeing not a trace of remorse, and was extremely disappointed. He said, "Just for your personal gain, you've delayed my starport construction project for over a week? Do you think I have time to spare?" Yes, the site selection for Jayota province is indeed a bit better in natural conditions, but not by much. It's highly replaceable. But in other aspects, the Skaro Highlands simply crush you. The Alliance's major infrastructure projects started 3 months ago. Look at what you've done during these months. With roads, railways construction, you've barely completed a route from Rubbish Town to Wuxing City and Revival City, and the rest of the projects are dragging on and on. Especially the eastward projects, they have been delayed until now and haven't even started. Do you think I'm not aware of your little schemes? Thinking the land carved out from Yan Fangxiu's eastern campaign is not enough, thinking Jayota province hasn't expanded enough, thinking Jayota province and the eastern provinces have similar industries, both important resource production areas, with little room for cooperation but intense competition, and if the railway and road networks in Jayota province were connected with Xianja province, it would allow them to reap the benefits without any effort. That's absolutely not what I was thinking. Henry knelt on the ground with a thud. Gu Heng was even more disgusted. Since when does the Alliance have a ritual of kneeling on the ground? Embarrassed, Henry got back to his feet. "I don't care whether you think that way or not, I'm not interested in arguing with you about it," Gu Heng continued, "I only look at the facts in front of me. The Development Department has laid out several phases of the infrastructure plan. If you don't understand the significance behind these plans, that is your own blindness, your indifference to the overall development of the Alliance, and is a dereliction of your duty. What's worse is that you fail to comprehend and also refuse to execute. A phase of the project was given 4 months, and now 3 months have passed, and the construction goals for your Jayota province have only just been barely over half reached. Every other province has done better than you. Even the newly established Tvu province has pushed their projects over the halfway mark. Xianja province has even completed their Phase 1 construction and has built many additional roads in the Skaro Highlands to facilitate future logistics work after the starport is established. Raphael's planning, from the transportation of materials needed for the starport construction, to personnel support, to the planning of the transport hub city grounded on the starport, has all been schemed, and implementation is already underway. Why should the development department abandon that location and choose your Jyotia province? Just because you haven't even finished building the railways yet? When the time comes for the starport construction, are the construction teams supposed to drive bull trucks over muddy roads to transport construction materials valued at tens of millions to the site? Henry's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. It's not that there has been no construction, I have also been part of planning. Enough, your messing about has already forced us to delay the starport construction plan by a week. Do I need to wait another 2 months for you to complete the basic infrastructure that should have already been built, and then proceed with the plan? At this point, Gu Heng had lost any desire to continue discussing the matter with Denison Henry. He made his final decision. Henry, I appreciate your help a year and a half ago, but you've gained more from it. My tolerance for you is limited. I don't wish for you to constantly bring up those things and ignore your actual duties. To put you in charge of Jyotia province wasn't meant as a reward for your past merits. Frankly, do your past deeds deserve a province as a reward? I put you in charge there hoping you would contribute your abilities to advance our cause, not to rest on your laurels. I am extremely disappointed with this matter. I think you are not suited to govern a province. I'll have Ozania pick a more suitable replacement. However, your grade C9 position, as well as all related benefits and allowances, will be maintained as my thanks for your help initially. Hearing this, Denison Henry's face turned deathly pale. Am I being dismissed? To think that I am the first provincial and ministry-level official to be dismissed since the establishment of the alliance. Henry was filled with deep regret. Chapter 352. What? The governor of Jyotia province has been dismissed. Wasn't it just a resignation? The newspaper said Chief Henry had health issues and went to recuperate, didn't it? The man is still an elder of the alliance establishment, so he deserves some respect. Being dismissed sounds so harsh. Voluntarily stepping down to rest is a bit more dignified. Oh. I see. But how could such an elder be dismissed? Perhaps it's because he was ineffective at his job. Earlier, the newspapers were talking about the progress of the Alliance's first phase infrastructure projects. Jyotia province's progress was barely better than that of Tvu province, which was only established less than 2 months ago. The governor must have been dissatisfied. You can analyze so much from the newspaper. Of course. I was one of the first batch of refugees who escaped from Green Valley to Wuxing City. I had already obtained official citizenship long ago. This time, I came back to Green Valley because I saw the results of the Alliance's infrastructure efforts and made up my mind to set up a transport team. My application plan was supported by the Biking Valley Province Agriculture Bureau, and I received investment. Look, I'm not just a transport driver, my fleet already has 16 vehicles, running this line and linking more than 200 farms. The sounds of people talking passed through a vehicle. It was a modified iron bull truck, its bed extended and covered with a tarp, with a few windows opened for ventilation, resembling an armored transport vehicle. About 20 people sat inside, listening to the driver boast. The vehicle sped along a hardened road in the plain area of Biking Valley area. On both sides were lush green fields characteristic of summer. The breeze carrying the sun's warmth and the scent of early summer blew through the windows of the canvas, making Cohen Pulia feel almost intoxicated. The pain from his forced retirement, after losing his right arm, right eye, and right ear, seemed to diminish significantly. He was from Green Valley and had enlisted during the campaign by the Alliance to pacify the Green Valley region half a year ago. However, he had enlisted a bit late and barely caught the battles in Green Valley. After spending several weeks in the recruit camp, he was transferred to a regular unit. But unlike most who joined the units of the Green Valley Group Army stationed there, he was sent to the Central Army Group 2nd Infantry Division and subsequently returned to Central Province, before moving eastward to fight in the eastern provinces. The combat in the eastern provinces was relatively easy, but that ease referred more to the overall situation. Specifically, at the level of each platoon and each soldier, it didn't mean there was no danger at all. At the time, Cohen Pulia's platoon was ordered to eliminate a resistant bunker. The heavy artillery bombardment wasn't very effective, so soldiers had to go in and deal with it. Cohen Pulia was on the assault team. His squad's attack went relatively smoothly, and under machine gun suppression, they approached the bunker's entrance and blew it up. Once inside, they eliminated many of the enemy obstructions, incurring only 4 casualties. But at that moment, they encountered a homemade bomb set by the enemy. An explosion burst beside him, and he passed out immediately. His comrades did not abandon him and rescued him back to the field hospital in the rear. After an amputation surgery, his life was saved, but he lost everything below the elbow of his right arm, his right eye was blinded forever, and his right ear was also blown off. With such severe injuries, of course, he couldn't return to his unit. The unit promoted him by 1 rank and let him retire as a private first class. In the strict sense, Cohen Pulia's military career of barely 3 months ended just like that, marred with disability. He was very despondent and hopeless. He had come from a family of serfs, and after coming to the army, he experienced a life previously unimaginable. Despite facing combat and danger, he loved his comrades from different places, enjoyed the squad leader's rough but caring shouts, loved the brotherhood with his fellow soldiers as they fought side by side, and appreciated the ramblings of the company political instructor, which often included lessons and stories. He didn't want to retire. But there was no choice, his current physical condition simply didn't allow him to continue in the army. However, the generous treatment the Alliance gave to retired soldiers and disabled veterans gave him hope and a light in the darkness. First was the promotion to the rank of private first class. This promotion was significant, as the retirement pay of a private first class was 1 level higher, and, when he transitioned to civilian status on the spot, he was directly granted the E9 civil service rank. This amounted to a guarantee for the future. Moreover, he was not just retiring normally but retiring due to disability. This meant that in addition to the standard retirement pay, he would also receive a generous pension. Additionally, he had a third-class combat medal. Speaking of which, it should be mentioned that the Military Administration Department designed 3 new levels of combat medals, ranking below the Revival Medal and the Extinguishing Wind Medal. These medals represented not only honor but also an additional lifetime stipend. All of this together, the pension and retirement pay, allowed Cohen Pulia to have a substantial sum of money after retirement to improve his life and to support himself for a long time. The E9 civil rank meant that as long as he followed the arrangements of the Military Administration Department Veterans Affairs Bureau and did some simple work, he could achieve a middle-class living standard. This included food rations, housing subsidies, medical care levels, and education for descendants. The stipend from the E9 rank combined with the stipend from the combat medal could provide a nice additional quality of life on top of his basic living needs. Chapter 353. Cohen Pulia finally decided to return to his hometown, taking his own money, his civilian grade, and his medal allowance. After completing the formalities, he boarded the train home. The just repaired railway tracks carried him swiftly from Xianja City back to Bagu City. Here, he first handled his demobilization procedures and transferred his identity to the Biking Valley province. Comrades at the Demobilization Security Bureau would continue to pay attention to the situation of all veterans within the province, making sure they received what they were entitled to. Next, he went to the Provincial Civil Affairs Bureau, and there he found out about his family's whereabouts. His family had been relocated to a place called Microthermal Farmstead, where they were designated as agricultural workers. Having determined the location of Microthermal Farmstead, he followed the guidance of the staff, made his way to the suburbs, and found a canvas-covered truck. This type of canvas-covered truck, modified from an iron ox, could carry more than 20 people at a time. They were connected to Bagu City by a network of newly built highways and reached almost every registered farmstead via numerous transportation towns that served as hubs. He waited 2 days in Bagu City, and once the driver had gathered 20 passengers, he boarded the vehicle. After a 2-day journey, he was almost there. The driver was still boasting, the passengers were still chatting away, but he could already see his hometown from afar. Microthermal Farmstead, we are here. If I remember correctly, we have an old soldier among us who needs to get off here. Yes, he replied. All right, then get ready to disembark. Soldiers with your kind of combat honors are people our old Bree admires the most. Without you folks, where would we get the great situation of the Alliance today? Hope to see you again. Yes, hope to see you again. Outside the gates of the farmstead, he disembarked from the truck, dragging his luggage with his remaining left hand. During this process, the enthusiastic passengers all offered a helping hand, assisting him in getting his belongings down. After giving thanks, he bade goodbye to everyone and entered the farmstead. This was his hometown, he was a Biking Valley native. At least since his grandfather's generation, they had worked as hired laborers at Microthermal Farmstead. The plantation owner provided food and drink, but nothing else. In the past, he hadn't thought much of it, even believing the farm's lord to be quite benevolent since neither his grandparents nor his parents had starved to death. But now he saw things differently. Having heard many principles and stories from his instructors, he realized that his family's past way of life was wrong. If that was what home was like, then he had no attachment to it. But the alliance had changed all that. So he had come back. He observed the scene before him, both familiar and somewhat strange. The defensive walls that had been built to protect against the aberrant beasts and marauders had been partly dismantled, leaving only a symbolic gate emblazoned with the name Microthermal Farmstead. In their place, tall wooden watchtowers had been erected, with people on duty. The function of this watchtower, he guessed, was to monitor the surroundings in advance. Of course, the person on duty in the watchtower saw him. It seemed he said something, and soon someone came hurrying over. "Cohen, is that really you? You're back." The newcomer approached quickly with a warm smile, but upon seeing his hand, eyes, and ears, his expression changed. "Momo, hello. These are scars from the war. You've suffered, Cohen. Do your uncle and aunt know you're back? I wrote them a letter, so they should know, maybe? But it might also have gotten lost. Anyway, I'm back now, and they'll find out soon enough. Then come with me, I'll take you home." Momo insisted, taking many of his belongings without further ado and leading him to his family's house. Along the way, Momo told him about the enormous changes that had taken place in his hometown during the several months he was away. Many people had left, at least 80% of them. It was said that there was still plenty of undeveloped land in the province, and with the introduction of large machinery, the planting industry at Microthermal Farmstead didn't require as many people. His parents were originally supposed to be relocated as well, but they insisted on staying there to wait for Cohen to return. According to policy, they negotiated and did not move. Now, they no longer lived in the communal dormitories for farm serfs, instead, they had their own small house. As part of the plan to clear the jungles, there was an abundance of timber resources with no place to use them, all of which went to the synthetic starch factory. Of course, there was a lot left over, so a lumber mill was established, which could be used for building houses or for wood exports. In fact, using the timber in this way was more economical and sensible than crushing it directly into synthetic starch. Now, only the wood that was left over from the lumber and paper mills, and which was of lower quality, would be sent to the synthetic starch factory. His father and mother built a new wooden house not far from the farm, where they lived with his sister and brother. Their family had been allotted 1,000 acres of farmland, an unimaginable amount in the past. First, it was impossible to cultivate that much land, and second, it was unthinkable for one family to be given so much. But now it was possible. Farm machinery had changed the production model, and efficiency had become extremely high. Plowing no longer required dragging the old oxen back and forth, tractors with plows could do it in one pass. Sowing seeds was the same, with the newly distributed high-yield seeds said to produce much more than before. Likewise, applying pesticides no longer required manual sprayers or toiling in the fields. Tractors pulling pesticide machines could cover the ground with just a few passes. In the future, when harvest time came, combine harvesters and agricultural stations would be able to solve big problems. With Priya's parents and the help of his brother, now 13, things were a bit tough but manageable to take care of those 1,000 acres. It wasn't just their family, most of the families who stayed had similar situations. The corresponding agricultural machinery had been distributed to the farmstead, and everyone was learning and using it. His underage siblings were ranked E3 with food rations, his parents were E5, prime working age, with not just enough food but also a stipend to save, whether for buying household items or saving up to purchase their own farm machinery to cultivate more land. And according to the annual production of agricultural products, citizen ranks would be reassessed every 6 months. Those who did well and produced high yields would rise quickly in rank. Even the average or even slightly lazy ones, as long as they were working and meeting the minimum production quota, could still rank up over time, just not as quickly and with a cap. Now, everyone's life had improved. Not just the basic rank provisions for food and clothing, but there was also extra money to buy novel items from nearby hub towns, a new piece of clothing, a fan, a radio, quality durable furniture. All of these had truly changed the lives of everyone at Microthermal Farmstead. Add latest chapters at Freeognovlo only. Hearing his little brother talk about these things felt as warm to Priya as the wind laced with the scent of fresh grass. He became more optimistic, and a smile spread across his face. Although he could no longer stay in the army, returning home seemed to be a very good choice. With his severance and pension, his parents should be able to buy some farm machinery, avoiding the need to queue and scramble with others, and could even rent them out. Just like what he heard from the truck driver en route, if someone could run a transport fleet, perhaps he could manage a fleet of farm machinery. Later, he could hire people to help him, further expand the land he could contract, enlarge the production, and if the yield increased, his parents, sister, and brother could advance in ranks even faster in the future. Despite being handicapped, with a lost hand, an eye, and an ear, and being half disabled, he could still do his part to ease the family's burden. A rank of E9 was considered high in the farmstead, and even though he was partially disabled, maybe Xiaoyume would still agree to marry him. As he walked, he chatted with Momo and imagined the future. He could see a small wooden house in the distance. That was his home. His parents were waiting for him. He couldn't help but grab Momo and quicken his pace. "Hey, Koen bro, don't rush like that," Momo said. "Take it easy, there's quite a lot of stuff, and your body is also." But how could his friend's advice stop him when his heart was flying home like an arrow? Yet, as he approached his home, his pace slowed. He heard his mother's crying coming from inside the house, mixed with his father's murmuring voice and some scolding sounds. Chapter 354. Since setting out on his journey home, everything Koen Pulia had seen and heard had been beautiful. He had spent the whole journey fantasizing about his future life. But what he had not expected was that the first discordant note would come from his own home. Could it be that my house is on fire? He suppressed the anger in his heart, stopped outside, and continued to listen to the conversation inside drift out. The fee for borrowing farm equipment, the tax on land, the poll tax, the amount your family has to pay has been reduced as much as possible. Don't be ungrateful. Thank you, my lord, thank you, but, his father's somewhat feeble voice came from inside, the notices posted in the manor and the officials from the provincial city, didn't they say all of these were free? They said from now on we are all agricultural workers receiving benefits and subsidies, that all belong to us. They talked about collective ownership of means of production and that everyone could use them. And the grain produced isn't ours, it's public property, what we get are just our own benefits and subsidies, so why do we have to pay these fees with our own subsidies? Oi, Pulia old man, you've become quite the smooth talker, haven't you? Talking about some lord from the provincial city, a couple of years back, they were all peasants, worthy of being called lord. All this stuff about notices, go and see now, are there any notices posted now? Another burst of scolding came through. Koen Pulia's expression turned extremely cold, yet his eyes were so heated they seemed about to spew fire. He turned halfway to look at Momo as if asking what was going on. Momo looked a bit awkward, his gaze shifting. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered, "I don't know either, how did it happen to be today that the Lord's people have come to your house?" "Look, Koen, I have some other things to do, I'll just leave your stuff here, we'll talk another time." Clearly, this Momo didn't want to get involved in the matter and scurried off like a shot. Pulia didn't have the chance to hold on to him and ask more questions. Inside the house, his father's voice rose again. "But, my son is about to come home, Koen went to fight for the governor, and lost an arm. We need to save what's left of our benefits, otherwise what will we do in the future, ah?" Before he could finish, there was a crisp slap, followed by his father's cries of pain. "Don't you have any respect?" Listening to this, Koen was filled with rage and could no longer stand waiting outside. With a forceful push, he entered the room. After a quick scan, he saw his siblings stealthily peering through a cracked door from the side room, his mother sitting and crying, his father, who had just been slapped, covering his face, and 3 arrogant-looking men. He knew these 3 men. All were so-called lords, former servants of the manor owner of Microthermal Farmstead. They didn't farm or labor but diligently served manor owner Zeklin, formerly heads of the manor militia team. Now, Zeklin no longer had ownership of Microthermal Farmstead, but he still managed to become the farmstead's administrative head by exploiting policies during the Green Valley Mutual Aid Society reformation by the Alliance. And his former servants, under his manipulation, had become civil servants in this village-level administrative unit. Outside the house, Pulia had more or less understood the whole situation. It was nothing but Zeklin and his lackeys still treating Microthermal Farmstead as their private property. Those who remained on the farmstead without moving were still his slaves. All this talk about fees for farm equipment use, land taxes, poll taxes, none of these existed in the Alliance, and yet, this guy was inventing reasons to collect them, using the government's administrative power. And would the collected taxes be handed over to the Alliance? Obviously not. Moreover, they wouldn't dare touch the land's produce. After the reform in Viking Valley, all the land was state-owned, they wouldn't dare take anything from the hands of the alliance government. But to brazenly rob the farm workers, agricultural workers, of their benefits and rations, they had the audacity to do that. And quite a lot of it. Now, Puglia was extremely angry. He was not only angry about the unbearable treatment his family received and the slap his father endured, but also angry that his ideals had been fundamentally challenged. Although he had only been in the military for a few months, he had come to identify deeply with his sacrifice. He had offered his maimed body in exchange for the happiness of all Rage Owl Star people, to break the cannibalistic environment formed in the wasteland, to rebuild a beautiful home. It was a noble mission, and he regretted not being able to continue fighting for this grand cause in the military. But as he returned to his hometown to continue the great cause in another way, he was greeted by this scene. This was a betrayal of the Alliance's ideals, a subversion of the governor's declaration, an insult to the countless people who went through fire and water for the entire planet. In his fury, he calmly asked, "Who hit my father?" The leader of the group sized up this markedly changed, disabled man, starting to remember. "Cohen. It's me, who took a swing just now. I did it, what about it?" One of the men blurted out. With a crisp smack, Puglia's good left hand delivered a slap in response. Chapter 355. He had lost an arm, indeed, but he was honed through the miraculous training of the boot camp, truly experiencing the battlefield for 3 months, grasping the lives of at least 7 or 8 people in his hand, a veteran who was capable of being selected for the arduous task of conquering a fortress. The lost arm was gone forever, but the remaining one was still very strong. The man was somewhat prepared, but still couldn't dodge or withstand it, and got hit squarely by a slap, flipping directly onto the ground, unable to get up in a disheveled mess. Seeing this, the other 2 charged at Cohen Puglia. But they were no match for Cohen Puglia, a half-disabled veteran, and in 2 or 3 moves, they were all knocked to the ground by his one remaining hand. In the end, the 3 of them could only help each other up and flee in a wretched state. "Think you're something special because you served a few months as a soldier, hey?" Came back a cripple, missing an arm and blind. "You just wait." Before leaving, they didn't forget to drop a harsh threat. After those few guys were chased off, the siblings who were hiding in the house ran out to embrace their brother from both sides. Their father put down his work, looking at his son who had changed so much in character since leaving home. Aside from the missing arm and disability, he didn't know what expression to show. Their mother, on the other hand, wiping her tears, approached him, caressing his amputated limb and the injured half of his face, sobbing uncontrollably. Cohen Puglia comforted his younger siblings and sent them back to their rooms before he had time to have a proper talk with his parents. At this moment, his mother had stopped crying, but still showed a pained expression upon seeing his right arm. "We shouldn't have let you join the army." "Don't be like that, Mom," Cohen tried to sound light-hearted. "I've never regretted joining the army. In the East, there are many more people like us who need help. We were there to liberate them. Besides, although I didn't come back fully intact, at least I made it home, and the army's policies are quite good. I brought back a lot of pension money, enough to renovate our house, buy lots of things, even our own farming machinery. I'm still ranked E9, higher than most people at the farmstead. Life will get better from here on out. I would rather you came back without a scratch than need that compensation money," his mother replied. Cohen had anticipated his mother's response. A mother worried for her son would naturally feel this way. He could only continuously reassure her, and gradually her mood improved. At this point, his father, filled with concern, spoke up, "Today, you drove away Zeklin's men, they won't let this go easily." Cohen turned his head and replied confidently, "Yeah, I think so too. But now, it's the Alliance that rules, not the times when he could cover the sky with one hand. I'll write a letter later, and when a pony cart passes by, I'll have someone send it to the Veterans Affairs Bureau in Bayguz City, they'll take care of it." When he said this, he seemed full of confidence. And it was precisely what he believed. What will happen then? That Zeklin will definitely get punished, and our whole farmstead won't have to endure his oppression and humiliation any longer. Hearing this, his father didn't look relieved but rather heaved a sigh and said, "If you ask me, why not just give them the money, maybe even apologize to the people you hurt today? If they knew you had that much compensation and pension money, the subsidy they want isn't much, just give it to them." "What kind of talk is that?" Cohen said, displeased. How can we encourage that scoundrel's arrogance? The pension, though generous, was exchanged for one of my arms, and there's no extra to give them. The subsidies you two get come from toiling in the fields, and however small, they should not be given to him. Old Priya wanted to say more, but his son stopped him. That's enough, Dad, let's not talk about this anymore. I'm going to write that letter right now, that guy won't be hopping around for much longer. Afterward, the Puglia family set aside their worries and enjoyed a reunion dinner together, chatting for a good while more. Cohen wanted to help clean up but was stopped. You're in no shape to be helping out, go rest. Cohen didn't insist and returned to his room. The newly built wooden house on their property was not small. To facilitate work in the fields, the house was situated on the edge of the estate. There was a vast open space around it, and because of the special period, the lumber was very cheap, so when it was built, they had taken into consideration space for the children to start their own families, hence the sizable area and the many separate rooms. Back in his room, Cohen took out the paper and pen he had brought back and began to write. Read new chapters at Empire. Before leaving home, Cohen Puglia could barely read and was considered semi-illiterate, but in the few months with the army, he had made substantial progress in education. The military had even provided them with stationery, including journals and writing materials. Writing a flamboyant article was difficult for Cohen, but with careful consideration and using common characters to clearly express the situation, it was not a big problem. It's just that his writing was a bit slow, but he had nothing else to do now. He had meticulously recorded in his diary the sights and encounters on his journey home, the infuriating incidents he faced upon his return, and his own reflections on these matters. The immense changes in the Viking Valley region that had spontaneously given rise to feelings of happiness and anticipation. The rage and pain upon encountering the remnants of the old era's poison still festering at Microthermal Farmstead. The disdain for those shameless people, along with the expectations for the alliance. He scribbled down many words, taking a long time, late into the night, still writing under the light. He wished to put all these things down in writing. Later, when tearing out this section of the diary, paying a bit extra for a passing airship's driver to help send the letter should be feasible. If that proved impossible, he would simply make the trip to Bagu City himself. After all, the roads were now unobstructed, a mere 2 or 3 days' journey. His only concern was whether his parents might be in danger if he wasn't at home. As he pondered this, he heard a strange commotion outside. Having just been discharged from the military, his vigilance remained heightened. He cracked open the window and peered out to see aberrant beasts. No high-level creatures, just ordinary, melee-capable cannon fodder types, but at least 20 at a glance. Why were there so many aberrant beasts, almost surrounding their house? He instinctively tossed the diary underneath the bed and quickly got up, planning to wake his family. But just then, the tightly secured wooden door of his house was smashed open. Looking over, he saw a somewhat familiar figure in total disarray, running into the distance. Before he could give chase, 2 aberrant beasts tied up with ropes now loosened charged in through the door. Cohen's instinct was to draw his gun and fight, but at that moment, he had neither blade nor gun in hand. I have finished telling the story, Milia de Rong said, exhaling deeply, closing the diary in her hands. She and her teammates were from the Demon Hunter Squad, a unit reporting directly to the Alliance's Supreme Court. Their team of 20 was responsible for heading south to investigate corruption in the Viking Valley province. Milia de Rong lifted her head, gazing at her brother-in-law in front of her. Chief Jason Morgan, after hearing this story, what are your thoughts? Jason Morgan, whose constant stress in recent months had begun to give him premature grey hair, lowered his trembling hands from the table's surface. He fell silent for a while before saying, I am deeply saddened. Anything else? I am very sorry. Anything else? I feel a great sense of guilt. Milia de Rong slammed her hand on the table and demanded, all these are evasive answers. Do you have any idea that within your jurisdiction, neglect of duty, corruption, and even the murder of civilians by officials are happening on a large scale? The incident I've related is by no means an isolated case across the 3 million square kilometers of Viking Valley. Do you even grasp the severity of these matters? Chapter 356. Milia de Rong's fate took a dramatic turn after being convinced by her sister to attend the wind-extinguishing Zongxi Academy, and then being selected for the advanced class. She had never cared much for what she considered to be mere ideological cultivation, only getting involved to appease her sister. However, at the Zongxi Academy, she pondered many things. After graduating from the advanced class, she was chosen by the Alliance Supreme Court. At the moment, the political system of the Alliance can be roughly divided into three parts: the Alliance Army, which includes the military government sector, the Alliance General Staff Department, various group armies, brigade-sized units, with the Governor-General directly controlling all military departments. The second part is the Alliance Government, with the Prime Minister as the head and accountable to the Governor-General. It directly governs the various provinces and has direct departments for civil affairs, production, development, commerce, education, and so on. The third is the Alliance Supreme Court, with Lambert Hodgson serving as Judge Hodgson and responsible to the Governor-General. It oversees the Legislative Council, the Executive Council, the Disciplinary Council. The Demon Hunter Squad, a newly established organization, is part of the Alliance Tribunal. The Tribunal, an armed force that is independent of the three councils of the Supreme Court, is responsible for executing major events. The Tribunal can be understood as the Alliance's secret service organization. Demon Hunters have the authority granted by the new Alliance Secret Enforcement Law to carry out secret arrests, interrogations, and executions without going through the three councils. Initially, after graduating from Zongxi Academy, Ms. Durong was placed into the Anti-Corruption Bureau under the Disciplinary Council, and then, more recently, when the tribunal was established and they were recruiting demon hunters, she applied and was selected. After undergoing demon hunter training, Milia Durong now carries a pistol and a short knife as part of her daily equipment, and her squad is also equipped with grenade launchers, chainsaw swords, and exoskeleton suits, ready to take down fortified targets when necessary. Moreover, every demon hunter masters a little bit of unique abilities after completing training. For example, Milia Durong can make her eyes glow, causing creatures gazed upon by her to panic and feel dizzy. Tests have shown that some physically weak animals can even die of heart rupture. Her comrades have various powers too, like lie detection and inducing fear, all kinds, and while not particularly strong, they are somewhat practical. This ability seems to be called spiritual energy, but the Governor-General, having met them, also said that compared to full-fledged practitioners of spiritual energy, their powers are incomplete, with only a single function and not adaptable for flexible use, and the intensity is not too strong. But that was enough for Milia Durong, who in her more than 20 years of life, had only fantasized as a child that she might possess extraordinary abilities. Besides combat skills and spiritual energy-related special abilities, there is also a considerable amount of knowledge in areas such as investigation, tracking, analysis, features of heresy, and other academic content. After the formation of the Demon Hunter Squad, they were split into two teams, one headed west to the distant western desert, and even further west across the continent to gather intelligence. Durong's 7-person team, on the other hand, patrolled within the Alliance territory, investigating internal cases of corruption. During their inspections in the Viking Valley region, they encountered many cases. Although they have the authority to arrest, judge, and execute secretly, Judge Hodgson had also told them before departing not to wield this power unnecessarily or in non-urgent situations. The Alliance's normal system is capable of addressing issues, and in most cases, they just need to pass the information they gather to the relevant government authority for handling. Typically, their role is to supplement the investigative work that the Alliance's normal system fails to cover. Only when the Alliance's system has become so corrupt that supplemental investigation cannot achieve their goals would they need to invoke their special authority. This time, their patrol in Viking Valley province followed the normal procedure. In the Viking Valley region, the kinds of incidents that befell retired veterans like Priya and his family were not isolated but occurred on a large scale. Certainly, not every case was as deplorable, but the presence of parasites and corrupt elements exploiting farmers on various farmsteads was not uncommon. Along the way, they couldn't possibly arrest so many people, they just took down some evidence and made a list of names. They had originally planned to spend a month or two to complete a full circuit and then directly send the related intelligence, lists, and evidence to headquarters for the Discipline Committee and to the Viking Valley provincial government. Under the oversight of the Disciplinary Council, they would thoroughly clean up the outrageous grassroots management situation in Viking Valley province. However, when they reached Microthermal Farmstead, they came across the case of retired veteran Priya's family being massacred, acquiring the critical piece of evidence, this diary. At this point, the Demon Hunter Squad couldn't hold back any longer. Up to then, it had been mostly cases of corruption, oppression, bodily harm, and acts of violence. There were murders, but those were relatively rare, not to mention, this current case involved a massacre targeting veterans who the Alliance always insisted on treating preferentially. This was a serious breach. Stay updated through Empire. The demon hunters were acutely aware of how angry the Governor-General would be if the news of this incident reached his ears. Chapter 357. They simply abducted him and then hurried non-stop to Bagu City. The diary slapped onto Jason Morgan's face, as the demon hunters waited for the provincial leader to give an explanation. The matter was handed over to Morgan's sister-in-law, Milia Durong. If Jason Morgan's response failed to satisfy the demon hunters, they might actually use the secret execution laws granted by the Alliance to take the senior official back to the capital for review by the discipline committee and trial by the governor. Read new chapters at Empire. At this moment, Jason Morgan, being interrogated, let out a long sigh and gave his response. I am aware of the situation at the grassroots level, but I did not anticipate it to be so serious. This is my responsibility. I will write a report and then personally report the specific situation within the province to the governor. Even if the governor accuses me of dereliction of duty and inefficiency, and I become the second high-ranking official to be dismissed in the Alliance, I will bow my head and admit guilt. However what? Before that, I have to personally capture all these rats within the province and create a clean environment for the next leader of Viking Valley Province. Why didn't you do it sooner? Sigh. Jason Morgan sighed. I will explain this to the governor. But first, tell me, where is Zeklin, the one you captured? He has been sent to the Supreme Court in Revival City. This is a case with extremely bad influence. Judge Hodgson is beside himself with rage. He wants to use this person to quell his anger, the governor's anger, and the entire Alliance's anger. What were you planning? It's a pity. Morgan sighed. It seems I won't have the chance to strip his skin off myself. There's no need, this guy will definitely be sentenced to death. His skull will be turned into a servo skull and then thrown somewhere to serve. Oh, now there is also servant mech transformation technology. The Alliance has special uses for death penalty convicts. They won't just kill them off, that would be too wasteful of resources. Oh, so it is. Their vile lives can continue to serve the governor. They really got off easy. Indeed. But it doesn't matter, there are many more in Viking Valley Province who need to atone in this way and continue to serve the Alliance. I will capture them. I hope you, the Demon Hunter Squad, can assist me in this task. Milia Durong hesitated, then responded, we generally do not accept tasks assigned by local officials of the Alliance, and we don't need to cooperate with others. However, since we initiated this matter, let the Disciplinary Council of Viking Valley Province itself, the police, and government forces, cooperate with our action. Fine, whatever it takes, as long as those people are captured. Gu Hang, of course, was aware of the anti-corruption campaign in the Viking Valley region. That included the tragedy of the veteran. This case indeed made Gu Hang very angry on a personal level. As the sole dictator of the Alliance regime, setting aside personal emotions, values, and moral concepts, he also found it intolerable from the perspective of reason and interest. The destructiveness of the matter was obvious. The exploited public's production capability would be suppressed, which is a direct impact. Their consumption capability would also be suppressed, thereby spreading throughout society and creating a negative effect. People's grievances would incite a wave of distrust in the Alliance government throughout society, which would have a huge negative impact on the implementation and enforcement of all future policies of the Alliance. In extreme cases, it could lead to rebellion in specific regions. Isolated incidents are limited in impact, but according to the reports sent by the Demon Hunter Squad, during their investigations in the past period, of the 131 farmsteads of Viking Valley Province, 40% had varying degrees of managerial corruption. The situation at Microthermal Farmstead was the worst. The other places hadn't gone as far as to annihilate your family if you disobeyed. These grassroots managers would embezzle the public's subsidies, benefits, concoct reasons to collect extra taxes, charge for production materials distributed by the Alliance. The man from Microthermal Farmstead named Zeklin did just that. There were those who reached out to the Alliance as well. They would secretly alter the production targets set by the province's production bureau, increase the production quotas for the public, but when submitting agricultural products, they would use the normal targets to embezzle the difference for personal gain. They would then repackage it as black market goods to sell to the public. These corrupt conditions largely occurred when the Mutual Aid Society was restructured into local administrative organs, with acts committed by the original plantation owners. For the farmsteads that were split off to cultivate new lands, there was a much lower probability of such incidents. Many of those farmstead owners were elected from the grassroots pioneers, and some were directly appointed by the province's officers. The purity of the team was relatively better. But among them, other situations arose. For example, they would deliberately raise the production plan targets, demanding that the farmers under their management increase their labor hours. These grassroots managers wouldn't embezzle but submit everything. What they pursued was to obtain higher scores in the performance evaluations of the Department of Political Affairs, aiming for a quicker promotion in rank and position. Chapter 358. But the people suffered greatly. The same E5-level farmers could end up doing twice the amount of work. The 8-hour workday was still in place, and according to the most preposterous production plans, Gu Heng could tell at a glance that the farmers under that guy's control would all be worked to death without being able to complete his agenda. Is this corruption? Objectively speaking, the increased production advanced the province's agricultural development plans, but one must understand that most of the laborers in Viking Valley province were proletarians, not proprietors. The land wasn't theirs, it belonged to the alliance. They were agricultural workers, not farmers. Agricultural workers are a kind of worker who essentially go to a job, their rank, benefits and allowances can be considered a salary, and they live on wages. Farmers own their land and work in agriculture. Their livelihood depends on the land's yield, how much they produce, the taxes and rent they pay, and the rest is theirs. Major increases in agricultural worker productivity, of course, are good. After all, the extra produce, not a bit of which goes to the laborers, all belong to the alliance government. But Gu Heng didn't need to go to such extremes. If someone wanted to work 12 or 16 hours a day when 8 hours were clearly enough to meet the basic requirements, that's their choice, and the government could offer faster promotions to reward such behavior. But this is not something that should be forcefully required by administrative power. Yet, when it came to specific matters, Gu Heng found himself in a dilemma. The guy who falsely reported production plans and pushed his workers to exhaustion, that one needed to be dealt with. But what about those who really did raise the production plan targets, who motivated the workers with slogans like higher yields, faster promotions, more benefits, a better life, and encouraged everyone to work hard? And those who researched practical agricultural machinery technologies, imparted agricultural production experience, and raised production quota targets? There were too many scenarios. If everyone was punished indiscriminately, all their enthusiasm would be squashed. Handling vast lands and populations with a one-size-fits-all approach is an extremely difficult task. Appropriate plans must be considered, the lessons from this experience must be summarized. As for the specific anti-corruption work in Viking Valley province, Gu Heng actually didn't intervene much. He believed that the Demon Hunter, the Disciplinary Council, and the provincial government, working in concert, would give him a satisfactory response. Currently, the governmental institutions of Viking Valley province had already launched a sweeping campaign against corruption. When the time came, those who legitimately committed offences would be sentenced as they deserved. Those who were sentenced to death could serve their time at the Skull Workshop, which was short on materials. Those not sentenced to death would be stripped of their positions, demoted and sentenced to labor for a set period. There were specialized labor camp prisons where they would serve their sentences with the lowest E2 entitlements. Even to avoid issues with local imprisonment, many people would be sentenced to labor in the mines of Wuxing City, the waste recycling facilities of the eastern provinces, or places like Ruin Mine. And Gu Heng looked forward more to Jason Morgan giving him a more rational, more systematic plan, to address corruption, to address disguised corruption, to address the behavior of increasing work pressure at the expense of agricultural workers' lives for the sake of promotion. These issues that had come to light were Morgan's test, deciding how Gu Heng would treat him personally. Chapter 359. In the past 2 months, the Disciplinary Council, Viking Valley Government, and Demon Hunters have jointly conducted a large-scale anti-corruption campaign in Viking Valley Province. This operation investigated the integrity of more than 1,700 farms, from the Baegu city government to the entire province, accounting for 20% of Viking Valley Province. A total of 614 individuals, including corrupt base-level management personnel from the farms and their accomplices, were arrested. Of these, 99 were sentenced to death for particularly heinous crimes, 515 were sentenced to varying terms of labor and stripped of all their citizenship ranks and privileges. Additionally, 852 people were subjected to demotion of varying degrees and deprivation of official duties. The main targets of this phase of the operation were the plantation owners from the local Viking Valley province who had turned into base-level farm managers when the Mutual Aid Society was restructured as the provincial government a few months ago. Accordingly, those sentenced to death will be placed in death row cells, awaiting skull workshop and servant bot workshop to carry out the execution as per your policy. In the next phase of the operation, we plan to further expand the scope of investigation, predicting that it will take another 2 months to complete the anti-corruption work throughout Viking Valley Province. Gu Hang listened and nodded as he did. At the moment, 3 people were sitting in front of him. Lambert Hodgson, the highest judge of the Alliance, Oceana Kinko, the Alliance Premier, and Jason Morgan, the head of Viking Valley Province. The one currently presenting the anti-corruption work report was Lambert. His department, being the main responsible body for such tasks, naturally required him to make the detailed report. In fact, Gu Hang felt quite reassured about this. Lambert had experience in this field. Back when the new alliance had just been established, he had deftly handled the internal purge in Revival City. Now, he had even more resources at his disposal, not only the investigation teams from his own discipline committee but also the exceptional abilities of the demon hunters, and the full cooperation of the local government in Viking Valley Province. His strategy was also sound. Since the preliminary investigations had clearly identified the biggest issues with the base-level managers from the old era, it was natural to start the investigations with them first. Gu Hang fully understood the policies previously implemented by Jason Morgan. To reduce resistance and mitigate opposition, the primary goal was to restore the agricultural production in Viking Valley Province, and so, at the beginning, it was not feasible to crack down on all the landlords who had once held de facto power in Green Valley region. His approach did indeed contribute significantly to the production and construction in Viking Valley over the past several months. With production rapidly restored, land reclamation efforts smoothly pushed forward, and the process of restructuring local governments faced acceptable levels of resistance. Moreover, it must be said that the former wealthy landlords did have an above-average level of capability. Just look at Oceana, who came from the landlord class, a young lady brought up in wealth and afforded a complete education. It was not as simple as just being literate, they were versed in calculation, accounting, law, management. In various aspects, these people were part of the elite class in Green Valley region. They certainly outmatched the serf class in terms of abilities due to their significantly lower level of education. To rule effectively in the short term faced with a vast environment of 6 million people over 3 million square kilometers, Jason Morgan really had no other choice. It would be the same for Gu Hang. When he first recovered Revival City, he conducted a slew of purging actions to establish authority, but in the end, wasn't he too dependent on the city's intellectuals, engineers, business classes for governance? However, it was now indeed time to sweep those historical issues into the dustbin. Lambert Hodgson's purge was quite severe. He examined more than 1,700 farms, arresting over 600, with more than 800 processed. It wasn't a bloodbath, but it was no light touch either. During this entire anti-corruption campaign, some of the former elite did withstand the test. They were not caught in any serious wrongdoing during the purge, or they only had minor issues that did not tarnish their reputation, and they maintained a decent reputation among the public. That was quite heartening. After all, not everyone was worthless. If all the elites of the old era were to be swept away completely, it would be impossible to replace them. Of course, the current intensity of the actions seemed about right. After Lambert had finished discussing the anti-corruption campaign itself, it was then up to the administrative officials Oceana Kinko and Jason Morgan to discuss their matters. Firstly, there was the issue of how to fill the roles of so many people who had been dealt with during the anti-corruption campaign. This is where the education department needed to step up. Oceana had provided plenty of help to Jason Morgan by reallocating a large number of graduates from the Comprehensive Academy to Viking Valley Province recently. Now, the graduates from various academies were very much in demand. Governments in various places across the Alliance desperately needed a large number of talents provided by Revival City to fill the reconstruction of all levels of government. The Comprehensive Academy of the Alliance, over this period, had already trained a large number of candidates in various disciplines. This talent requires quotation marks. Because the training time is still too short, the abilities of these talents are quite doubtful. Chapter 360. Although the Education Department of the Union has already established a relatively complete educational system in Revival City and Wixing City, covering various aspects such as vocational education, technical education, and comprehensive education, it is still too early, and children receiving education can't possibly grow up overnight. For adult education, there could only be short-term, high-intensity knowledge training before they were hurriedly sent out to make their mark on the workplace. But after all, having some talent available is better than before. Moreover, these cultivated talents needed some positions to demonstrate their abilities. The vacancies created by these farms in the Biking Valley region were just right. Even Gu Hang had sent many of those top students that his mother had previously arranged for him, putting them to work in the Biking Valley province. By that time, Gu Hang felt his mother really had some good ideas. He couldn't quite trust these people. Given the situation on Rage Owl Star, where would you find 100 highly educated alien university students? Lack of trust didn't matter, after all, they were talents, so just deal with them as you see fit. Gu Hang couldn't resist this temptation either. You couldn't just waste them, could you? Time to get to work. If you want to be entrusted with important tasks, it wasn't impossible, start from the grassroots and work your way up. If someone was truly reliable, Gu Hang wouldn't mind having a proper chat and recruiting them under his command. In summary, these methods had temporarily filled the gaps at those basic farms in the Biking Valley province that were left without managers. While discussing this, Ozania also took the opportunity to inform Gu Hang about the current priorities of the education department. Currently, the educational work of the Union seemed to be going quite well. A series of educational systems from elementary to middle to university had been established in the crucial Twin Cities region. Union citizens, according to different ranks, could enjoy varying degrees of free education and subsidies. The first 6 years comprised the compulsory education phase. The children of citizens above E5 rank were free. To encourage enrollment, after admission, the rank of the children themselves would be E2 or E3, meaning additional benefits to reduce the pressure of upbringing. Those of higher ranks could get free education at the middle school level. Beyond middle school, students' good performances in school could directly lead to rank promotions. Normally, people only receive the E5 rank after reaching adulthood and being allocated a job. However, if students performed extremely well and were outstanding, they might acquire a higher rank while still in school, which clearly provided great help for them when leaving school and entering society. The so-called university level referred to the Comprehensive Academy, Technical Academy, and Loyal Air Academy. Here, ranks didn't matter, education did come with fees, but essentially, students in university were not lower than E6 rank, and their allowances were almost enough to cover the expenses. Moreover, top graduates from various middle schools, particularly the best ones, could receive even higher subsidies. The thresholds for advancing from elementary to middle, and middle to university, all hinged on examinations. The 3 major academies also practiced a policy of easy admission but strict graduation, making it not easy to graduate. Even though the 3 major academies were taking on a lot of adult education work, the diplomas were still granted according to different levels. Adult education had its own certificates, of course. If you could pass the regular exams, you could also obtain a standard certificate. In any case, everything was considered for issuing ABCD 4-level certificates, based on exams, in-school performance, and practical results. Now, students from various schools, whether they were just middle school graduates who didn't get into university or those who received adult education in middle school, were being eagerly sought after by all sectors of society. Enterprises and factories are competing for them, and government units are too. Even the military wants in on the action. The Military Administration Department under Tadeus also needs a lot of civilian military officers. The 3 major academies are expanding their scale, and in addition to that, the primary and secondary school systems are also spreading outwards. For now, the Ministry of Education and Culture has started to implement the primary-secondary education system in some of the larger settlements outside the Twin Cities. For example, Baegu City and many other settlements with around 200,000 people in the central province outside the Twin Cities, with a population of 2 million. And the long-term goal is to have primary school institutions cover every settlement of Union citizens, to have secondary school institutions cover every urban-level region. Gu Hang nodded frequently as he listened. Perhaps it was because of the ideologies he had even before his transmigration. Education held a very high importance in his mind. He hoped the Union could produce more and more talent, even if not all of them were of great vision and grand strategy, as long as they could shine in their respective positions. Undoubtedly, the improvement of the population's quality would lead to an increase in productivity. After Ozania, it was Jason Morgan's turn to speak. This provincial leader was about to present his report card. We will reform the assessment methods of the grassroots farms. Production targets will still be the most important aspect. We will optimize this by setting 3 benchmark lines based on the farm's population, arable area, and the number of agricultural machines: passable, excellent, challenge. The corresponding planned production targets will fluctuate along these lines, but they should not deviate wildly from reality with inflated production plans. We will significantly increase the penalties for not meeting standards. The rewards for achieving excellent targets will be quite significant, however, the incentive to go from excellent to challenging targets will be reduced. And rewards will be more directed to individuals who complete production rather than the managers. In this way, we hope to require the farms to meet basic production targets, encourage overproduction, but not completely force everyone into a cutthroat environment. Apart from production targets, we will also include citizen satisfaction in the assessment criteria. Grassroots managers will need to improve citizen satisfaction while fulfilling production plans, otherwise their assessments will be negatively affected. In the appointment of grassroots managers, we are also ready to pilot a reform. Instead of being appointed solely by the upper government, we will offer several candidates who will present their policies, plans, and intended actions to the farm residents for them to choose from. Overall, we hope that by giving the public the power to make reverse selections and by caring about citizen satisfaction, we can increase the accountability of grassroots officials to the public and reduce oppression and corruption events. We are also aware that citizens may have unreasonable demands. It's possible that dissatisfaction votes could be used to blackmail grassroots officials, preventing the farm from fulfilling its production targets. It could also cause efficient officials to lose out to those who are more eloquent and better at campaigning. There are still many problems with the plan, but on the whole, it should be an improvement over the past situation. In terms of practical assessment, the Provincial Civil Affairs Bureau, Development Bureau, and Production Bureau will develop more comprehensive plans to supervise the actions of grassroots officials and set more reasonable objectives. They will also be mindful of the pitfalls and issues I mentioned before. A document was spread out in front of Jason Morgan as he calmly explained how he would proceed if he continued to serve as the leader of Viking Valley Province. Gu Hang was listening attentively, and from time to time, he would ask questions about certain details as Morgan explained. There were many areas where Morgan was prepared, he would expound and clarify, but there were also aspects he hadn't fully thought through. He didn't get annoyed or nervous, instead, he would ask Gu Hang and the other two high-ranking union officials present if there were better solutions. At the end of the discussion, Gu Hang made a decision. There are indeed many potential problems, but overall, it sounds like an improvement from before. Let's go ahead and test it out, see what happens, and then tackle any problems that arise. Hearing the governor say this, Jason Morgan felt a sudden wave of relief. It seemed he had passed